Chapter 980. The words of the Emperor Lord's remnant soul caused Long Chen's heart to sink. When he looked at it with the Emperor Lord's remnant soul, he discovered that the blood pillar's aura was formed from death chi. The two god kings immediately stopped when they heard Long Chen's words. Long Chen's ability to break the formation made them even more reliant on him. The Emperor Lord's remnant soul and Long Chen discussed for a while, but they had already come up with a way to break the formation and destroy the Blood Moon Well. Long Chen's eyes swept across the people of Baiyishan and said in a deep voice, "Since you've come here today with no regard for your lives, can you promise me one thing?" The people of Baiyishan looked at each other and answered without hesitation, "The method to break the Blood Moon Well has been passed down for generations. As long as you can break the Blood Moon Well, so what if we die?" These people were already prepared to die before they came. In their opinion, Long Chen and the others were worthy of respect for coming even though they were outsiders. Long Chen nodded and said, "I want to carve an inscription in your souls. As long as you agree to this, you just have to listen to my orders. You may not lose your lives here." Everyone nodded and agreed. At this point, they had no other choice but to believe in Long Chen. Buzz. The two god kings opened their minds and allowed Long Chen to carve the inscription on their souls. The blinding light even covered the surrounding blood and light of the formation. This is not the soul of an emperor. The god king who had the inscription on his soul was extremely shocked. That vast ocean-like intent made him tremble from the bottom of his soul. This was definitely not a soul power that an emperor could possess. The others also looked sideways, but under the guidance of the two god kings, they did not ask too many questions before Long Chen carved the inscription on their souls. Long Chen's forehead was covered in sweat. These inscriptions were carved by him using the Emperor Lord's remnant soul. The two god kings glanced at Long Chen deeply and said, "You actually have such a secret on you. No wonder you had to carve such a pattern. With this Tao pattern, I'm afraid you can easily erase all the connections between us." At this moment, the two of them seemed to regard Long Chen as a heaven-defying master who had taken over someone else's body. It was even very likely that he was a god emperor. Therefore, they addressed him with more respect. Long Chen nodded. It was just as they thought. This Tao pattern was left behind by the Archlord's remnant soul. It was indeed to completely erase their origin memories. Next, he was going to fuse with this wrist bone. If news of him being able to fuse with the source of the Monarch Lord's remnant body was leaked, he would definitely attract countless powerful enemies. He knew that this day would come sooner or later, but the later it came, the better it was for him. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Long Chen slowly walked towards the center of the Blood Moon Well where the wrist bone was located. Tao Law threads began to condense in his hand and eventually landed on the wrist bone. As the threads of Tao Law fell, the primal chaos golden codex in Long Chen's body began to circulate. The divine light around his body began to intertwine with that of his wrist bone. At this moment, the two god kings, many venerable sovereigns, and even Zhuzang Dizuan could not help but tremble. Long Chen could actually devour the source of the Monarch Lord's remnant body. Without waiting for the God King to speak, Zhuzang Dizuan said in a trembling voice, You're the person who shook the inextinguishable Tao Law a long time ago, the younger brother of the ancient sacred world's lord." His voice became softer and softer until it was almost inaudible. He knew that once this matter spread, it was very likely to shake the entire ancient sacred world. Everything related to Long Chen would be destroyed. Long Chen did not answer. He was still rapidly absorbing the source of the Monarch Lord's remnant soul. He needed time. The large amount of death energy contained within gave them hope of survival. However, all of this had to start from the first wrist bone. Time passed by, second by second. After everyone knew about Long Chen's secret, they became even more respectful towards him. The two God Kings were also very confident. In the blink of an eye, 2 full days had passed. "We can't go on like this. Long Chen will need at least 10 days to fuse with the wrist bone. If we don't do anything during these 10 days, it will definitely arouse suspicion." The immeasurable emperor's Tao ring glowed as he heard the clamor of the people outside. At this moment, even God King Bone Kill was very confused. Long Chen and the others had been in the Blood Moon Well for too long. The wrist bone was connected to the Blood Moon Well. He had not changed most of the Tao patterns on it. He had only changed the source of blood energy into death energy. If he rashly broke the wrist bone, the death energy would definitely gush out and kill them in the Blood Moon Well. Even if someone managed to get out alive, they would be killed by the array formation outside. We can't wait any longer. If these people can really break through the Blood Moon Well safely, it will be fine if it's just one of them. If they can break through the array, the other 6 Blood Moon Wells will all be destroyed, the old woman said in a deep voice. The old lady said in a deep voice, at that time, even if we kill them, it will be meaningless. Compared to the dangerous situation Long Chen and the others were in, the people of the Red Moon were actually still on tenterhooks. The array of the patrolling God Kings was really giving them a headache. God King Bone Kill and the Ethereal King looked at each other and nodded. It was obvious that they were also very concerned about the Blood Moon Well. Go and ask the patrolling God Kings to open the array. We'll directly kill these people. The old woman nodded and motioned for the people behind her to report this to the clan. However, at this moment, dozens of venerable sovereigns suddenly rushed out of the Blood Moon Well. Every one of them was covered in death energy and had painful expressions on their faces. They had just rushed out of the Blood Moon Well when they were completely crushed by the power of the killing array emitted by the 7 patrolling statues. Even their souls burned with monstrous flames as they endured unparalleled pain. Buzz! 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 Before anyone could react, they saw death energy rising from the Blood Moon Well where Long Chen and the others were. It seems that they can't help but make a move. After all, if they wait any longer and the Blood Moon Well is completely opened, only death awaits them. The old woman stopped what she was doing again. The other God King behind her, who was about to pass down the order, couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. He clearly remembered that the patrolling God Kings had taken away nearly 1,000 venerable sovereigns to feed the array flags the last time they came. Death energy lingered above the blood pillars as countless array lights crisscrossed. No one could see into the Blood Moon Well even if they looked from afar, but if they really saw the scene inside the Blood Moon Well, they might be so shocked that they would be speechless. Inside the Blood Moon Well, Long Chen was still fusing his wrist bones, but the venerable sovereigns behind him were transforming their source strength into death energy and rushing out of the Blood Moon Well. Chapter 981. People from the people of Baishan kept dying. These people transformed their divine power into death aura and poured it out of the Blood Moon Well. The people of the Red Moon even saw many sovereigns die in the formation after rushing out of the Blood Moon Well, and they immediately felt relieved. Day after day passed. Although many people saw the death energy, they still became impatient. They only calmed down when they saw a divine king fly out of the Blood Moon Well with his body covered in death energy, and then his body was crushed by the formation and his divine soul was trapped in it. One of the 2 divine kings has been forced out. It seems that they will all be annihilated by the death energy in the well in 4 or 5 days at most. Divine King Bone Kill said lightly. They waited for another 5 days. On this day, the death energy in the Blood Moon Well began to gradually disappear, and the original blood red light pillar was long gone. The people of the Red Moon subconsciously thought that Long Chen and the others had died in the Blood Moon Well. They waited for the 7 patrolling statues to remove the formation. Otherwise, they could not even see the Blood Moon Well, let alone confirm whether Long Chen and the others were dead. What's going on? It has been 16 days since the people of Baishan entered the Blood Moon Well. Why haven't the patrolling statues removed the formation yet? Could it be that there is still someone alive in the Blood Moon Well? If so, we can only wait for the other Blood Moon Wells to be activated, then kill him and wait for the formation to be removed. Everyone began to speculate. But gradually, the Ethereal King and Divine King Bone Kill frowned. Divine King Bone Kill was the first to speak. Something is wrong. I can still clearly sense the aura of that skeletal creature. The Ethereal King nodded and glanced at the divine souls of the people of Baishan who were still struggling in the formation. He replied, these people have been struggling. Although their divine souls are rapidly weakening, and 70 to 80% of them have died, the remaining people seem to be waiting for something. Rumble. Just as the two of them realized that something was amiss, they heard a deafening roar coming from the Blood Moon well where Long Chen and the others were. After the rumbling sound, the surging death aura turned into a torrent and rushed out. It even broke through the divine light of the array. The violent death aura immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the Red Moon. Under the watchful eyes of everyone. However, they saw a person standing proudly in the midst of the death chi. Buzz. A burst of ear-piercing rumbling sound entered everyone's ears. When they focused their eyes again, that person had already disappeared. The deathly aura above the Blood Moon well was still turbulent, but there was an additional person under the cover of the 7 patrolling statues. This person was Long Chen. Long Chen held the 9 firmament-suppressing halberd in his hand. His entire body was shrouded in death chi and divine light. Wherever Long Chen's halberd passed, the power of the array was suppressed. He charged straight towards the 2nd Blood Moon well. Isn't that the Emperor Realm Master from before? Who the hell is he? When did the people of Baishan have such a person? Not only can he break part of the array of the patrolling statues, but he can also survive under the deathly aura. Don't worry about that. He seems to want to destroy the other 6 Blood Moon wells. The patrolling statues have no effect on him at all. The people of the Red Moon kept shouting. At this moment, they were in a complete mess. The old lady of the Divine King realm looked extremely gloomy. She stared at Divine King Bonekill and the Ethereal King and shouted, "This is what you get for not letting me find the patrolling statues. What should we do now?" The Ethereal King and Divine King Bonekill were also pale. They did not know how to answer. After a while, the two of them could only say, "This person may not be able to destroy all the Blood Moon wells. However, since he is suppressing the 7 patrolling statues, we will help him break this array. Once this array is broken, we will kill this person first." The old lady snorted. At this moment, she did not have time to argue with the two of them. With a command, everyone began to attack the array of the patrolling statues. At this moment, the old lady was extremely regretful. She blamed herself for not reporting to the patrolling Divine King beforehand. Even if she had to pay a huge price, it would have been much better than the current situation. However, even if she reported to the patrolling Divine King now, it was probably too late to stop Long Chen. Rumble. The God Kings of the Red Moon Divine Clan struck at the same time. Endless rumbling sounds and powerful will of destruction spread out. The patrolling statues that were originally used to suppress all the patrolling statues near the Blood Moon wells had become objects to protect Long Chen and the others. This was probably something that the patrolling Divine King did not expect. Long Chen flew alone into the space where the Blood Moon wells were. Everywhere he passed, endless arrays rolled over. Lightning was like a blade, and flames were like hell. A terrifying aura and endless aura that even the Divine Kings were wary of swept over him. The 7 patrolling statues rose and fell one after another. Every statue had Tao laws evolving. Tao rhymes condensed and flowed. It was extremely terrifying. Such a terrifying scene was blocked 10 meters away from Long Chen. It could not hurt him at all. Under the Jiao Sanyang halberd, the Tao laws trembled and the inscriptions collapsed. Everywhere Long Chen passed, there was an endless aura of death and constantly shattered array Tao patterns. The aura of death helped Long Chen block the array around him. With the Divine Lord's remnant soul, it was not impossible for Long Chen to directly suppress the Tao patterns in the 7 patrolling statues, let alone break the array. However, he could not do that. At this moment, he had to use the aura of death to block the array. Only by walking in it could he destroy the Blood Moon wells. The aura of death blocked the power of the array for him. These arrays also completely isolated the people of the Red Moon outside. Long Chen saw that countless people of the Red Moon outside the array had already begun to attack the array. He knew that there was not much time left, so he had already used his maximum speed. He quickly flew into the 2nd Blood Moon well and collected the 2nd Divine Lord's remnant body. It was a toe bone. As soon as the toe bone was taken away, endless aura of death began to rage. However, no matter how much the aura of death was like a tide, it could not get close to Long Chen. There was a faint divine light on his wrist that enveloped him. This wrist was the Divine Lord's remnant body that he had refined. This item had already been added with Dao patterns to suppress the aura of death by the bone-killed Divine Lord. It was not surprising that it could resist the aura of death. Long Chen had already refined the origin inside and could devour the power of origin inside at any time. When Long Chen rushed out of the second blood moon well, the red moon outside the array was in an uproar. Even the bone-killed Divine Lord was stunned. He stared at Long Chen and said, "How did he do it?" He could completely ignore the aura of death. Could it be that he is able to break apart all the Dao patterns I left in the white bones under such a dense death aura? This is impossible. Chapter 982. Godly King Bone Kill stopped attacking the formation. His green eyes stared at Long Chen. He could not believe that Long Chen could break the formation while the white bones were suppressing the aura of death. In fact, he was completely wrong. Long Chen did not break the formation, but refined the Supreme Emperor's bones directly. Of course. Godly King Bone Kill would never have thought of this. After he and the Ethereal King came to the Central Province, they chose to join the clan because of the Blood Moon Well. Using the Supreme Emperor's remains to restart the Blood Moon Well was also the method they proposed. Just to remove all the flesh and blood from the Supreme Emperor's remains, they had to use countless methods. If not for the fact that Godly King Bone Kill was a skeleton creature, he would not have been able to leave Dao patterns on a few bones. The Blood Moon Well was not only important to the Red Moon, but also to him and the Ethereal King. This item could make the Godly King puppets they refined with the reincarnation spring purer, and even grow rapidly and change their nature. But he never thought that a Supreme Emperor could refine the Supreme Emperor's remains. He still thought that Long Chen's attainments in Dao patterns of formation were beyond his imagination, and that he could even break the Dao patterns while the bone was suppressing the aura of death. Stop! The old woman in the lead was panting, but it was not because she was tired. Her eyes were bloodshot. The 7 blood moon wells were about to be broken by Long Chen in front of everyone's eyes. In order to restart the blood moon well, the Red Moon did not hesitate to seek help from the patrolling Godly Kings, losing a lot of resources. They were lucky to get 4 out of the 7 Supreme Emperor's remains, and the other 3 were split up and used by Godly King Bone Kill with great effort. This was why there were only bones of the Supreme Emperor's remains in the blood moon well. The old woman's voice faded. All the members of the Red Moon Divine Clan stopped their attacks. They knew that there was no point in continuing to attack. With a muffled sound, the blood moon well where the 7 blood pillars were completely lost its color. In its place were 7 giant pythons formed by the endless aura of death that surrounded Long Chen. Whoosh! The 7 blood moon wells were all destroyed. Everyone's eyes looked as if they wanted to kill Long Chen. The old woman seemed to have lost all her strength, but her voice was hoarse to the extreme. She stared at Long Chen with hatred and said, "There's no need to attack the formation. I want to see him die of exhaustion under the bombardment of the formation." The people of Baishan walked out of the blood moon well and stuck close to Long Chen. The old woman obviously also regarded Long Chen as one of those people of Baishan who didn't care about their lives. Although the boundless death chi was able to resist the might of the formation, how long could it last? But at this moment, God King Gu Kill suddenly said, "This person wants to break out of the formation. Otherwise, wouldn't the appearance of these people of Baishan increase the pressure on him for no reason? Unless they want to die under this pressure." As soon as he finished speaking, a smile appeared on the corner of Long Chen's mouth. Many people might think that they were seeking death at this moment. But as God King Gu Kill said, he wanted to break out of the formation. Long Chen used more than 10 days to refine the wrist bone in the first blood moon well. During this period of time, the people of Baishan even rushed into the formation in order to buy time and was killed by the 7 patrolling statues. If it was just to destroy the blood moon well, Long Chen felt that all this was not worth it. The death chi was his trump card to leave the Red Moon. Rumble. With a loud sound, Long Chen's halberd flew out of his hand. The 9 Azure Yan suppression halberd turned into a long rainbow and swept straight toward the patrolling statue closest to it. The traces left by the halberd were very strange and puzzling. The halberd seemed to come alive and kept drawing on the patrolling statue. A divine light would occasionally appear and enter the patrolling statue, and sometimes a few Dao laws would be pulled out. At this moment, the faces of the people of the Red Moon gradually became numb because of the shock. No one even made a sound. Countless pairs of eyes were fixed on the 9 Azure Yan suppression halberd and Long Chen. Long Chen's fingertips moved slightly, and the 9 Azure Yan suppression halberd kept moving and drawing. The patrolling statue was given to the patrolling Divine King by the Zhuge Forbidden God tribe. Can this person really break it? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Can he really break the patrolling statue? After all, he could destroy the Blood Moon well without being affected by the Death Qi and even control it. This meant that his attainment in Dao patterns and formations had reached an extremely high level. After a short discussion, everyone's eyes fell on Long Chen again. Even the people of Baiyishan who followed behind Long Chen had sweat on their foreheads. Everyone clenched their fists tightly. Long Chen said that he might be able to bring them out of this place alive. They were all from the people of Baiyishan. For generations, they had cultivated the technique to break the Blood Moon well. Once this day came, they had never thought of leaving the Red Moon alive. But no one was really willing to die here. Now, the one who broke the Blood Moon well was not them, but Long Chen. Long Chen was their last hope. In fact, if Long Chen was not here, with their techniques, they were afraid that they would all die in the death qi left behind by the bone-killed Divine King. This time, the Blood Moon well was unbreakable under the control of the bone-killed Divine King. Ka. A muffled sound spread. Although the sound was not loud, it was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. Under everyone's gaze. The patrolling statue in front of the 9 Azure Yan suppression halberd actually slowly fell from the sky and suppressed the ground. The brilliance on it was completely restrained. He really suppressed the patrolling statue of the patrolling Divine King. Who is this person? Could the Dao pattern of the patrolling Divine King's statue be so easily broken? How did he do it? If the patrolling Divine King knew about this, he would probably be extremely shocked. Do you think the patrolling Divine King would not know about the 7 patrolling statues' movements? Today, this person will definitely not leave this place alive. The people of the Red Moon were shocked and angry to the extreme. Not only did Long Chen destroy the Blood Moon well, but he also suppressed the 7 patrolling statues. Now, not only did the Red Moon well lose the Red Moon well, it was very likely that they would be blamed by the patrolling Divine King. The old woman looked at the Divine King experts and Dizun experts behind her. She took a deep breath and said coldly, "Once this person breaks the formation, take him down immediately. I only hope that the patrolling Divine King will come a little later. Let us take this person to atone for our sins." Chapter 983. The Ethereal King and the Bone-Killed Divine King had even used the Emperor's body to reactivate the Blood Moon well. Long Chen was able to break the Dao pattern array in the Blood Moon well and suppress the 7 patrolling divine statues. His strange ability had attracted their attention. The old woman pretended not to hear them. If the Bone-Killed Divine King and the Ethereal King had not stopped them from asking for help from the patrolling Divine Kings, they would not be in such a predicament. The old woman snorted. "You replaced all the Dao patterns in the Blood Moon well with Death Qi. What's the use of the Death Qi now? If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have come to this. All the masters of the Red Moon are rushing here. He's just a venerable sovereign. What can he do even if he has thousands of skills?" The Bone-Killed Divine King and the Ethereal King were speechless for a moment. They were indeed responsible for this. Long Chen's mysteriousness had really surprised them. The Ethereal King smiled bitterly and gave the Bone-Killed Divine King a look. The two of them slowly retreated with the 5 Divine King-level skeletons behind them. On the other hand, more and more people of the Red Moon arrived. All the Divine Kings and Venerable Sovereigns had gathered here. Rumble. An hour later, with a loud noise, the array patterns left behind by the 7 divine statues disappeared completely. The 7 divine statues fell to the ground and lost all their brilliance. Between heaven and earth, only the 7 pillars of death chi behind Longchen continued to fall from the 7 blood moon wells. Divine light surged all over his body, and there was a hint of pain on his face. The immeasurable emperor and many people of Baiyishan followed closely behind him. Everyone's forehead was covered in sweat, and their fists were tightly clenched. In front of them was the Red Moon, the fighting force of an entire clan. Destroy them all. Capture their souls and torture them for 100 years. The old woman was so angry that she had lost all her rationality. The Blood Moon Well was the hope of the Red Moon's rise to power, but they had failed after spending so much effort. Behind her were more than 10 god kings and more than 10,000 venerable sovereigns. Countless rays of divine light instantly fell upon Longchen and the others like a tide. The original area of the Blood Moon Well, except for the area within 100 meters of the Blood Moon Well, had turned into powder. The attacks of countless experts caused the space to distort. This scene caused even the God King behind Longchen to break out in cold sweat. He could not help but release his divine power. At this moment, Longchen suddenly took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Hold on tight. How long you can live will depend on the will of the heavens." His voice fell. The immeasurable emperor and the 9 treasures divine king placed their arms on his shoulders. The rest of the people of Baiyishan did the same. Rumble. Just as the endless attacks were about to land, more than 10 god kings charged towards them from behind. Longchen suddenly moved. The 9 heaven suppression halberd soared into the air and landed in the endless death chi. At the same time, the shadow of an Azura descended and followed closely behind. Before the Azura shadow could release any pressure, it shattered into countless phantoms in the blink of an eye. The stirring of the 9 heaven suppression halberd and the bombardment of the Azura whirling elephant immediately caused the endless death chi to spread out like a fog that covered the sky. Whoosh! The endless attacks fell into the death chi like a soldering iron being thrown into a pool. Everyone could not help but stop in their tracks. The ethereal king and the bone-killed divine king immediately flew back. They were not afraid of the death chi, but felt that something was not right. The bone-killed divine king was extremely cautious. In his opinion, Longchen would not be so easy to kill. The fact that Longchen could break the Tao pattern arrays he left in the 7 blood moon wells was enough to make him take him seriously. In fact, the bone-killed divine king did not know. Among the 7 blood moon wells, Longchen had only broken the first one by himself. The other ones were left behind by the people of Baiyishan. Divine rays of various colors shot into the sky, and terrifying auras rose one after another. The entire sky was covered under the death chi. Although such a majestic death chi could not kill a large number of experts from the Red Moon, it could still stop them from attacking. "Let's go!" At the same time, Longchen roared, and everyone instantly pushed their speed to the limit and flew into the sky. The divine rays on Longchen's wrist bones were like tides, and the death chi around them retreated. The bone-killed divine king immediately sensed where Longchen and the others were. In the blink of an eye, he changed directions with the ethereal king and rushed toward Longchen and the others. The death chi spread out in a large area, but its power was greatly reduced. Although it was troublesome for the Red Moon, it did not affect the bone-killed divine king and the ethereal king at all. The death chi was originally created by the 2 of them and was sealed in the Blood Moon Well. Amidst the endless death chi, the 10 divine kings also used various methods and quickly began to suppress the death chi around them. The expressions of Longchen and the others changed drastically, and they immediately sensed the auras of the bone-killed divine king and the ethereal king. "Your Excellency Longchen, please bring them back to the clan if you can. Please bring them back to the clan. Please bring them back to the clan." Firm and resolute voices rang out behind Longchen. The 2 divine kings suddenly flew back with the rest of the people who were left with only their divine souls. There were more than 10 people who were left with only their divine souls. Previously, they had turned their divine souls into death chi in order to make the Red Moon lower their guard. This included the Divine King who had rushed out of the Blood Moon well. There were also nearly 30 venerable sovereigns who were unharmed and did not hesitate to follow behind and die together. The leaders were 2 Divine Kings. The Divine King who was left with only his divine soul was slightly damaged after rushing into the array, while the other Divine King was full of divine power. Suddenly, white flames ignited around these people. The light of the flames even forced the death chi around them to retreat. In an instant, everyone turned into shooting stars and flew toward the auras of the bone-killed Divine King and the others. Boom! 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 A deafening boom resounded through the entire space. Dozens of venerable sovereigns who were at the peak of their battle strength self-destructed together with their divine souls, and endless divine power and divine souls swept out. The terrifying auras of the 2 Divine Kings almost swept through the entire sky before they died, blocking the path of the bone-killed Divine King and the others. The immeasurable Emperor and the Juzangdizuan were both moved. There were still nearly 20 venerable sovereigns behind them, and all of them looked aggrieved and angry. Rise! Longchen did not show any signs of letting down his guard. The divine light on his right wrist circulated and turned it into powder. As soon as he finished speaking, countless Daolaws appeared out of thin air. The 7 patrolling divine statues that had landed on the ground had once again emitted boundless divine light. A strong sense of danger suddenly enveloped everyone in the Blood Moon well. Most of the people of the Red Moon who had not yet escaped from the death chi felt the endless power of the array. Chapter 984. The 7 patrolling statues emitted endless divine light and once again covered the Blood Moon well. At this moment, the entire Red Moon was in a complete panic. Only God King Gukil and the Ethereal King were shocked. Half of their bodies had even been destroyed by the self-destruction of the 2 God Kings and venerable emperors. The 2 of them frantically tried to escape into the distance. How could they have the time to pay attention to Longchen? If the 7 patrolling statues were activated, the boundless array would become a death sentence for everyone. They could still clearly remember the scene of one of the people of Baiyishan's God Kings falling into the array. In just a short moment, he had been turned into powder, and his soul had almost been destroyed by the raging flames that followed. When God King Gukil left the Blood Moon well with the 5 God King level skeletons behind him, they could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. This person is extremely cunning. I have never seen the Tao of Array runes in my life. Not only did he break the 7 statues, but he also understood the main array inside and even erased the soul brand left behind by the patrolling God Kings. The 2 of them looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. On the other hand, Longchen and the others had already flown away and disappeared into thin air. Shio. At the same time, the old woman and the other God Kings also flew out one after another. These people used their divine power to bring the venerable emperors away from the Blood Moon well. The 7 statues floated up and down, and endless killing intent reappeared. The array in the sky rose and fell in an instant. Everyone hide in the Blood Moon well. The killing array will not affect the Blood Moon well. The old woman could not help but tremble as she shouted frantically. The God Kings also flew away, shouting non-stop. They frantically urged their divine power to break the death aura around the 7 Blood Moon wells as much as possible. At this moment, they had no intention of chasing after Longchen. If the array was fully activated, the 7 patrolling statues would kill countless of the Red Moon's core forces. Nearly 6,000 venerable emperors were still in the Blood Moon well. The 7 patrolling statues had already been activated, so they could not leave. He could only hide in the Blood Moon well before the formation was fully activated. This scene was actually very similar to that of Longchen and the people of Baiyishan. Quick, go and invite the patrolling Divine King. Our clan is willing to pay any price. Have him come to our clan as soon as possible. On the other side, one of them was 3 meters tall. There were 5 extremely deep runes on his bald head. Other than his eyes, there was almost no skin on his face. His entire body was covered in Tao runes. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that his entire body was covered in 5-colored divine runes. With each step he took, he could travel tens of thousands of miles. Behind him, there were 5 spirit soul array flags. The array flags belonged to the 5 elements, and they circulated behind him. This person was the patrolling divine king. At this moment, the news of the red moon had not yet reached him, but he was already on his way to the red moon. Someone was able to erase the divine soul imprints I left on the 7 patrolling statues. Could it be that the people of Baishan still have such a powerful person? This person muttered to himself. There was both surprise and doubt between his brows. The 7 patrolling statues were personally refined by the Zhuge Jinshan clan for him. Such a thing had never happened before. At the same time, Long Chen and the other 2 flew away under the spell of the remaining people of Baishan. If it were not for these spells, they would not have been able to leave the Red Moon so easily even if they had the chance to shake off the numerous divine kings and venerable emperors. After they left the Blood Moon divine clan, they sped all the way to the people of Baishan. Seeing that no one was chasing after them, Long Chen suddenly broke away from the spell. More than 20 venerable emperors also stopped in their tracks. They looked at Long Chen and asked, "Sir, what are you doing?" Everyone's faces were filled with respect for Long Chen. If it were not for Long Chen, they would not have been completely wiped out in the Red Moon. Even if they risked their lives, they would only be able to break through one of the Blood Moon wells. The endless death aura and the 7 patrolling statues were enough to kill them all. Long Chen glanced at the 20 venerable emperors. He took a deep breath and said, "I can't follow you back to the people of Baishan. Otherwise, the patrolling divine king will definitely come. The patrolling divine king will definitely not let the matter of the patrolling statues go." The immeasurable emperor nodded slightly. He put his palms together and could only sigh. For a moment, he did not say anything. Zhuzang Dizuan was the complete opposite. Now, he looked at Long Chen with eyes full of admiration. He completely understood why the 9 Treasures Divine King had asked him to follow Long Chen for a year. Today, Long Chen's actions had shocked him, both in terms of morality and methods. The 20 venerable emperors immediately shouted, "This must not happen. Sir Long Chen has offended the Red Moon and the patrolling Divine King for our people. How can we sit by and do nothing? You have participated in the palace examination. Now that you have joined our people, you are a member of the people of Baishan. If it were not for you, how could the Blood Moon well have been broken? We would not have survived. Our people cannot abandon you because of this." Everyone's voices rose and fell. Unexpectedly, no one wanted to let Long Chen go. Long Chen smiled bitterly and shook his head. He did not expect things to develop to this point. He was prepared to break off relations with the Red Moon, but offending the patrolling Divine King was unexpected. He had not been in the people of Baishan for long. In terms of benefits, perhaps the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzang Dizuan had gained a lot from the people of Baishan, but those things were useless to him. However, he did not regret it. It was all because of Baishing. "You have treated me like a country knight, and I will repay you like a country knight." Long Chen did not say anything more. He just said to the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzang Dizuan, "The patrolling Divine King will only look for me. It should be fine for the 2 of you to hide in the people of Baishan." "Amateus, are you scolding me?" The immeasurable emperor patted the skeleton creature behind him and put his palms together. Zhuzang Dizuan snorted coldly and said, "My father asked me to follow you for a year, and that's that. If I don't keep my word, how can I return to the 9 Treasures realm in the future?" Both of them looked determined. Long Chen shook his head, but there was a warmth in his heart. He and the immeasurable emperor had schemed against each other several times. It was really strange that they could still be so loyal to each other now that they had come this far. Long Chen nodded and flew away. The immeasurable emperor and Zhuzang Dizuan followed closely behind. The remaining 20 or so venerable sovereigns kept chasing, but soon they lost track of Long Chen and the others. In terms of speed, they were much slower than Long Chen and the others. The 20 or so venerable sovereigns looked at each other and slowed down. They looked at the place where Long Chen and the others had left, then bowed deeply and did not get up for a long time. The people of Baishan. Chapter 985. Inside the people of Baishan. Baiyeshing and the others waited day and night, expecting to hear the news that the blood moon well had been broken. Day and night, they did not leave the top of the mountain for even a moment, looking into the distance and daring not to slack off. They did not receive the signal that the blood moon well had been broken, but they saw streaks of white light in the dark night. At this moment, Baiyeshing, Baitsang, and the others were all stunned. As a god king, Baitsang could not help but tremble at this moment. They have come back alive, he cried out involuntarily. The blood moon well has been broken, but they can still come back alive. God bless the people of Baishan. They knew very well that if the blood moon well was not broken, they would never come back alive even if they could drag out an ignoble existence. More than 20 venerable emperors entered the people of Baishan one after another. Baiyeshing's expression changed slightly. He exchanged a glance with Baitsang, then led everyone into the Elders' Hall. Inside the Elders' Hall. Only then did Baiyeshing ask in a deep voice, "Are the two god kings and Long Chen all dead?" The leader of the venerable emperors shook his head and told him everything. Hiss. All the god kings sat up in shock. Baiyeshing's face was full of shock as he said, "You said Long Chen broke the other 6 wells and suppressed the 7 patrolling statues with the aura of death in the first blood moon well? Who the hell is he? How can he control the patrolling statues of the patrolling god kings?" Whether it was breaking the blood moon well or suppressing the patrolling statues, Baiyeshing and the others were shocked. But then, they thought of what kind of disaster Long Chen's action would bring. After a long while, Baiyeshing said in a deep voice, "Mobilize all the forces of our people. We must find Long Chen before the patrolling god kings in the red moon. We, the people of Baishan, will never stand by and do nothing, even if it will anger the patrolling god kings." On the other side. Inside the red moon. At this moment, the mountain range of blood moon well was covered in blood. The thick smell of blood did not disperse for a long time, and the mournful cries of souls rose and fell one after another. Under the 7 patrolling divine statues killing array, several thousand venerable sovereigns were trapped. Even though the 7 blood moon wells were crowded with people, there were still 1 or 2,000 emperors who were exposed and had nowhere to hide. The bodies of these people were crushed in an instant, and their divine souls were tempered in the raging flames. Outside the array, the people of the red moon were furious, and the old woman spat out a mouthful of blood. The death of 2,000 venerable sovereigns was an immeasurable loss to the entire red moon. But in the face of these 7 patrolling statues, no one could do anything. Godly King Gukil and a few experts who were proficient in formations also tried to go forward. However, when they explored a statue, they could feel the endless killing formations within it. They could only shake their heads and retreat. They couldn't help but recall the way Long Chen had suppressed these 7 idols with a wave of his hand. They couldn't help but smile bitterly. Time passed by, second by second. Even though the 2,000 venerable sovereigns had powerful divine souls, they were still gradually crushed by the 7 patrolling divine statues killing array. The people of the red moon were helpless. Only then did they realize that the distant sky was completely covered by the 5-colored light. In the blink of an eye, the 5-colored light covered the sky and replaced the sun and the moon. The people of the red moon were shocked. Whether they were venerable sovereigns or godly kings, they all bowed their heads. "Welcome, patrolling divine king. Welcome, patrolling divine king." The patrolling divine king appeared. Behind him, the 5 formation flags and divine soul porcelains were unconvinced and were rotating back and forth. The people of the red moon were silent for a while. The patrolling divine king saw that the souls of the venerable sovereigns in the array were about to be destroyed, but he didn't do anything. Instead, he focused all his attention on the 7 patrolling statues. Buzz. The 5 divine souls behind the patrolling divine king shook, and the 5 elements bodies fell into the array. The Tao patterns and divine light on the 7 patrolling divine statues gradually faded away. Have all 7 blood moon wells been broken? Even my 7 patrolling statues were suppressed. They even temporarily erased the divine soul brand I left on them. The patrolling divine king muttered to himself. As the patrolling divine king's voice fell, the killing array in the blood moon well area gradually disappeared. One after another, venerable sovereigns flew out of the blood moon well. Rumble. As soon as everyone walked out, they felt an endless pressure that suppressed thousands of venerable sovereigns. Thousands of people prostrated themselves on the ground, feeling as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. When the divine kings of the Red Moon saw this, they all stepped forward and respectfully said, "Please show mercy, patrolling divine king." The patrolling divine king didn't even turn his head. He coldly snorted and said, "I helped your clan because of the blood moon well. Now, all the blood moon wells have been destroyed. These 7 patrolling statues even need to be refined again. Let them be in charge of this." After he finished speaking, the 5 formation flag's divine souls all let out a terrifying laugh and rushed toward the crowd. Wherever they passed, the venerable sovereign's expressions changed, but no one dared to resist. As the divine souls passed by, a large amount of origin energy was forcefully torn out of their bodies. The divine kings of the Red Moon were all shocked. At this moment, Divine King Bone Kill stepped forward and said in a deep voice, "Patrolling Divine King, please calm down. Instead of taking their impure origin energy, why don't you let them capture Long Chen? As long as that person still has the item in his hands, it won't be difficult to open the blood moon well again. Moreover, this person's attainments in the Tao of Arrays should be met by Senior Buzz." As soon as Divine King Bone Kill finished speaking, the patrolling Divine King pondered for a moment and coldly snorted, "I'll only give you 3 months. If you can't capture this person, let the person with the purest origin energy in the Red Moon Divine Clan offer 5 years of Divine Soul origin energy." He waved his right hand, and the 5 formation flag's divine souls stopped devouring. The patrolling Divine King took a deep look at Divine King Bone Kill and the Ethereal King, then said, "If this matter succeeds, I'll take care of both of your requests at the same time." After that, the patrolling Divine King actually left an array flag for Divine King Bone Kill, then took the 7 patrolling statues and turned to leave. The people of the Red Moon looked at the array flag, but they were a little more wary of Divine King Bone Kill. In fact, even the patrolling Divine King was a little wary of Divine King Bone Kill and the Ethereal King, because he could engrave Tao patterns on the Sovereign Lord's body. Even he could not pry into the Sovereign Lord's body, otherwise, he would not have allowed the Red Moon to use it to open the Blood Moon well. Of course, the reason he gave the array flag to him was not because of this. Divine King Bone Kill looked at the Earth array flag in his hand and said in a deep voice, "Let's go. Let's go to the people of Baishan first." The patrolling Divine King gave the array flag to him to intimidate the people of Baishan. Chapter 986. After Longchen parted ways with the people of Baishan, he did not run away. The immeasurable emperor had repeatedly advised him to leave the people of Baishan and the Red Moon, and even stay away from the patrolling Divine King's area. Longchen did not agree. There were 2 reasons. Firstly, with his current cultivation, he would face greater danger if he continued to venture deeper into the Middle State, and the Zhuge Jinshan clan behind the patrolling Divine King was the biggest threat. Secondly, he still had 6 pieces of the Imperial Lord's body, and 3 of them were extremely rich in origin energy. If he devoured all of them, he might be able to step into the Divine King realm. Once he stepped into the Divine King realm, he would have the power to protect himself, and he would be able to leave after killing the Divine King of Bone Kill and the Ethereal King. Above the sky, beams of divine light flew away. The immeasurable Emperor and Zhuzang Dizuan watched in fear, and only after a while did they breathe a sigh of relief. The immeasurable Emperor said, "I'm afraid no one would expect you to stay in the Red Moon's area, but let's find a more secluded place." Zhuzang Dizuan also nodded, and then stared at the sky and said, "If you hide here, and the patrolling Divine King comes after you, you will definitely die." Longchen shook his head and said, "The patrolling Divine King probably won't do anything. After all, I left the 7 patrolling statues behind for him, and there are some hidden dangers, so he won't be able to do anything for now. Juzang Dizuan only knew why Longchen did not take the 7 patrolling statues. Longchen glanced at the mountain in the distance and said, "I think that place is not bad." The immeasurable emperor and Juzang Dizuan were stunned. That mountain range was the closest region to the Red Moon Divine Clan. Longchen smiled, hid his presence, and sped away. He did not make this choice without reason. The existence of the Emperor's remnant soul allowed him to avoid all detection forces. No one would have guessed that they were in the Red Moon region. Longchen and the others concealed their auras and entered the mountain range from the bottom of a river. They then opened up a cave residence. Inside the cave, Longchen immediately went into seclusion. The two of them were already used to Longchen's seclusion. Juzang Dizuan also knew that Longchen was able to fuse with the Emperor's body, so he was not too surprised. Back then, at the location of the Blood Moon Well, Longchen did not leave any Dao patterns on him. He remembered everything clearly. Longchen had fused with the remains of the Sovereign Lord's body. Only then was he able to manipulate the deathly aura and resolve the danger of the Blood Moon Well. Although the 20 or so venerable sovereigns who had returned to the people of Baiyishan knew the whole story, they were afraid that all information about the Sovereign Lord's body had been erased. Juzang Dizuan did not have any intention of cultivating. Instead, it was the immeasurable emperor who seemed to be very hard-working. However, the immeasurable emperor's cultivation method really surprised Juzang Dizuan. The immeasurable emperor took out a total of 9 magic weapons and placed them around him. Then, he began to cultivate. Each of these 9 magic weapons had an extraordinary aura. Juzang Dizuan could clearly see streams of aura entering the immeasurable emperor's body. He was actually using the power of the magic weapons to nourish his body. The immeasurable emperor saw how surprised Juzang Dizuan was and could not help but smile. He said in a deep voice, "Benefactor, don't be envious. Longchen seems to trust you quite a bit. Find a chance to quickly blackmail him. I got this cultivation method from him." As soon as he finished speaking, Juzang Dizuan was slightly surprised, but he still did not look away. A moment later, Juzang Dizuan's entire face was dark. He said, "This 9-colored glazed cup was used by my father as a sacrifice. How did it end up in your hands?" "Ah, misunderstanding, misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? You damn bald donkey, I'll kill you." Day after day, 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. The immeasurable emperor was cultivating with a bruised nose and a swollen face. He stared at Juzang Dizuan with a mocking smile. In these 7 days, whenever the bruises on his face disappeared, he would be beaten up by Juzang Dizuan. He knew that he was in the wrong and naturally did not dare to fight back. Bang, bang, bang. The two of them were just about to speak when they suddenly heard a series of banging sounds from below. Their pupils constricted, and they were shocked. As for the immeasurable monarch, he led the God King level skeletal creature away. He had only taken a few steps when he was stopped. This guy is really hard to find. Shu San looked around and said in a low voice. Juzang Dizuan had never seen Shu San before, so he instinctively attacked him. By the time his attack landed, Shu San had already disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at the entrance of the cave where Longchen was. Juzang Dizuan looked at the empty space in front of him, and for a moment, his hair stood on end. He did not even know how Shu San had disappeared in front of him. Even his father would not be able to match this speed. "Hurry up, my Imperial Empress has personally prepared a document for you." Shu San called out to Longchen. Juzang Dizuan looked at Shu San and muttered to himself, "Is this the Imperial Empress Academy that has been making a name for itself in the ancient sacred divine world recently? My father is telling the truth. These guys are so fast that even he blushed with shame." Shu San did not seem to have any intention of responding to Juzang Dizuan, but when he heard his words, he still seemed a little proud. Inside the cave, Longchen stopped fusing with the Imperial Lord's body and walked out. Shu San had taken the initiative to come here, so it must be related to the Imperial Lord's body. As expected. As soon as he walked out, Shu San threw a jade slip to him. This jade slip has recorded the location of almost all the Imperial Lord's body parts in the middle state. My Imperial Empress has personally found them, so there can't be any mistake. Longchen looked at the jade slip and felt extremely grateful. He bowed and said, Longchen accepts the Imperial Empress's kindness. I will visit you to thank you in the future. Shu San continued, the Imperial Empress said that she will give you the location of all the Imperial Lord's body parts in the ancient sacred divine world next time. After saying that, Shu San had already disappeared from where he was. Longchen was already used to the Imperial Empress's style of coming and going as they pleased. Zhuzang Dizuan snorted and said, you said that no one would find them. It has only been a few days, but the people from the Imperial Empress have easily found them. Longchen shook his head. There were only a few people that the Imperial Empress wanted to find. Longchen looked at the jade slip in his hand. He was not in a hurry to go into seclusion again. Instead, he said to the immeasurable Emperor, use the skeletal creatures to find a way to go to the people of Baishan to take a look. If he left the people of Baishan, the patrolling Divine King would not attack him. The Red Moon would not be willing to act rashly without the Blood Moon well. However, Longchen was still worried. Chapter 987. Outside the Red Moon Formation, within a mountain range that was only a few 100,000 miles away, Longchen had been in seclusion for 1.5 months. Only a leg bone was left of the Emperor Lord's body. The divine glow on it was extremely dim, and the threads seemed to have merged with Longchen's leg. Bang! After a muffled sound, the leg bone turned into powder and disappeared into the air. Longchen's eyes suddenly opened. There was a faint divine glow in his eyes, and there was actually a divine law contained within them. Everywhere around him that had merged with the Emperor Lord's body was emitting a terrifying aura. The flesh and blood seemed to have become one with the space of the ancient saint divine world. Complete sovereign, I can step into the Divine King realm at any time. Longchen took a deep breath and muttered to himself. At the same time, he also felt that as his cultivation level increased, the effects of the Emperor Lord's body were far less terrifying than the Emperor realms. The Emperor Lord's body that he obtained from the 9 Treasures realm had allowed him to reach the 6th level of the Imperial Emperor realm. Now, the Emperor Lord's body that he obtained from the Blood Moon well had only allowed him to reach the complete sovereign realm. However, even so, Longchen was already satisfied. In just a few years, he had gone from the Emperor realm to the Divine King realm. This kind of cultivation speed was something that no one in the entire ancient saint divine world could achieve. The Emperor Lord's soul said to Longchen, after this coronation, you should be able to step into the Divine King realm. With the cultivation of the Divine King realm, you should be able to protect yourself in the central region. Longchen nodded and signaled for the Emperor Lord's soul to begin the coronation. The divine spirit of the Sovereign Lord's remnant soul slowly materialized, and threads began to descend. Longchen's divine power and soul began to vibrate slowly, as if an earth-shattering change was about to occur. Longchen could vaguely sense the Emperor Lord's soul's gaze, which was filled with gratification and excitement. The Emperor Lord's soul had helped him regardless of the cost. His goal was to rebuild the ancient saint divine world that had fallen apart. Stepping into the Divine King realm this time was no different from taking another step forward. Rumble. All of a sudden, a deafening rumble rang out from the mountain, as streams of Dao laws that were almost solid plunged down from the heavens and smashed into the mountain where Longchen was. Layers upon layers of mountains were instantly riddled with holes. Looking from top to bottom, one could see that the Dao laws in every hollow of the towering mountain were condensed and did not dissipate. Inside the mountain, Longchen's expression changed greatly. The immeasurable Emperor and Zhuzang Dizuan were also aghast. What's going on? Are they playing with their lives? The immeasurable Emperor exclaimed as he looked at the mountain riddled with holes and the Dao laws surging towards Longchen like a spiderweb. At this moment, they were near the Red Moon. With the remnant soul of the Emperor, no one would have thought that they would be here. But now that Longchen had made such a big move, it was likely that the Red Moon would rush over as soon as possible. Rumble. As soon as the immeasurable Emperor's voice fell, the entire mountain, with Longchen at the center, collapsed in an instant. The mountain rocks within millions of miles were crushed into powder, and tens of thousands of source beasts were inexplicably smashed into pieces by the Dao laws. If they had not been searching for a barren land to hide their whereabouts, many people would have been killed. Amidst the billowing smoke and dust, Longchen's face was ashen as he helplessly asked the remnant soul of the Emperor, "Master, why is there such a big commotion this time? You know your disciple's current situation." The mountain range had collapsed, and wherever the smoke and dust had dispersed, countless Red Moon experts would rush over. The remnant soul of the Emperor did not seem to care about Longchen's words at all. He just snorted casually and said, "There are only a few thousand sovereigns and 7 divine kings left in the Red Moon. The strongest of these divine kings is only a 3rd-tier divine king. You have the halberd transformed from the world-suppressing cauldron, and I have personally crowned you as a divine king. What are you afraid of? 7 divine kings and a few thousand sovereigns?" The corner of Longchen's eyes could not help but twitch. He smiled bitterly and said, "Master, you must be relying on such an intense battle to quickly stabilize my realm." The remnant soul of the Emperor did not answer him directly. He just said, "I personally crowned you twice, and each time, it was almost perfect with the inextinguishable Dao laws. You have become a divine king this time, but no matter where you are, such a commotion cannot be concealed." Longchen shook his head and did not say anything more. Since things had already come to this, there was nothing else he could do. On the other side, in the Red Moon, divine rainbows shot into the sky. The 7 divine kings in the Red Moon immediately rushed over after sensing the strange phenomenon in the sky outside their clan. "Which divine king is crowning a sovereign outside our clan and causing such a commotion? Let's go and take a look first. This person is probably not ordinary. These Dao laws are extremely complete, and if they can be pulled down, the person who is being crowned must be extremely talented. A strange phenomenon in the sky. He must be an extraordinary person. Let's go and take a look." In fact, it was not just the Red Moon. These Dao laws fell from the sky and could be seen clearly from tens of millions of miles away. Many of the divine race were surprised and began to guess. Of course, most of the divine race thought that this person was someone from the Red Moon. After all, the Dao laws fell near the Red Moon. Many people secretly sighed that the Red Moon had really obtained a peerless talent this time. Outside the Red Moon, the immeasurable Emperor and the Juzang Dizuan almost cursed at Longchen. The two of them looked at the several beams of divine light flying within the Red Moon divine clan. They could even feel the terrifying might of a god king. Their faces quickly turned pale. Longchen slowly walked out of the dust ruins and came in front of the immeasurable Emperor and the Juzang Dizuan. He smiled bitterly and said, "Don't look at me with such resentment. This battle cannot be avoided. When the time comes, help me share some of the burden." Buzz. Longchen directly released the power of his cultivation, wanting to give the two some confidence. A terrifying pressure rushed toward them. Whether it was the immeasurable Emperor or the Juzang Dizuan, they were completely stunned. The two of them stared at Longchen as if they were looking at a monster. They clearly remembered that Longchen was only a 6th-level sovereign when he was still cultivating 1 or 2 months ago. Now, he had reached the divine king realm after seclusion. The immeasurable Emperor's voice trembled as he said, "You directly became a divine king after being crowned?" Longchen nodded. That was the truth. This time, he did not even wait for the opportunity to break through after being crowned. Everything happened naturally. The reason might be related to the 4 pieces of the divine Emperor's body that he obtained this time. The Juzang Dizuan's appearance was even worse than the immeasurable Emperor's. He stared at Longchen and was completely speechless. He finally understood why the heavenly fate realm cultivators in the ancient sacred divine world had deduced that only the ancient sacred divine Emperor's disciple could reform the ancient sacred divine world. Chapter 988. Several divine kings from the Red Moon came forward. Seeing the smoke and dust in the sky dissipate, their faces gradually turned pale. The eyes of the old woman in the lead almost popped out of their sockets. She never thought that Longchen had been right under the feet of the Red Moon. The divine kings behind her were also speechless for a moment. But after a while, they looked at each other. A middle-aged man with a crooked nose could not help but say, that Longchen's cultivation seems to have reached the Divine King realm. Divine King realm. At this moment, everyone was stunned. Only then did they realize that they were here because a venerable emperor was being crowned, causing a vision of heaven and earth. The old woman stared at Longchen and murmured, Could it be that you were the one who was being crowned? But why are you already a divine king? More and more people from the Red Moon arrived. Many venerable emperors seemed to want to see who could cause a vision of heaven and earth during a coronation. Longchen looked at the increasing number of venerable emperors and 7 divine kings in the sky and said in a deep voice, Of course. Why can't I step into the divine king realm under the feet of the Red Moon? Buzz. The 9 Heavens Suppression Halberd appeared in Longchen's hand. When the 9 Heavens Suppression Halberd appeared, the voice of the Divine Emperor's remnant soul sounded again. The weapon I used the most in my life was this World Suppression Cauldron. Since this thing has turned into a halberd, I have refined all the techniques used to use it into halberd killing techniques. After that, a Divine Soul brand was transmitted to Longchen's mind. This Divine Soul brand was very detailed, as if it had merged with Longchen's divine consciousness. The 9 Heavens Suppression Halberd in his hand suddenly shook. The black light on it was like a tide, forming the shape of a cauldron dragon that roared continuously. The immeasurable emperor and the 9 treasures divine king seemed to have sensed the change in Longchen, and they both moved closer behind him. With the Red Moon eyeing them covetously, the 2 of them had no means of protecting themselves. The immeasurable emperor stood behind Longchen and said, There's still a chance to run now. If we wait any longer, those venerable sovereigns will arrive, and we won't be able to escape. Longchen looked at the 9 Heavens Vanquishing Halberd in his hand and let out a long sigh. Take Little White and protect the 2 of you. Leave the rest to me. Longchen felt his blood boiling as he sensed the battle tactics that the Emperor Lord's remnant soul had just transmitted to him. In the ears of the 7 God Kings of the Red Moon Divine Clan, his words were no different from an insult. They didn't even think about who had crowned Longchen, the venerable emperor. The old lady was flustered and exasperated. She shouted, How can there be such an arrogant person in this world? If I didn't know better, I would have thought that you were a god born from the chaos. Behead him for me, but leave his spirit to be tempered for 100 years. With a loud shout, the divine kings turned into rainbows and descended on Longchen. The thousands of venerable sovereigns stood still and felt that Longchen was simply courting death. A guy who had just stepped into the divine king realm was challenging 7 divine kings. Rumble. The 7 divine kings also seemed to be rather disdainful, but the 3 in the lead attacked first. Violent divine power and a terrifying aura of destruction instantly covered a radius of 1,000,000 miles. For a moment, the mountains trembled and the earth cracked. Streaks of destructive attacks blasted toward Longchen. Wherever the 3 streaks of divine power passed, the weather changed. It was as if the laws of the world were roaring. The might of the divine kings was evident. The immeasurable emperor's expression changed drastically, and a divine light flashed between his eyebrows. The divine king-level skeletal creature roared and blocked in front of him. It grabbed Zhuzang Dizuan and frantically retreated. Longchen moved slightly. The halberd in his hand flashed like a rainbow, and the shadow of an Azura fell from the sky toward the 3 divine kings. At the same time, the halberd in his hand suddenly moved. The divine power on the halberd was torrential, as if endless laws of the world were connected. Wherever the halberd passed, the suppressive force caused the space to buzz. First halberd, unparalleled suppression of the 9 underworlds. The divine power around Longchen began to flow at an extremely terrifying speed. In the end, it actually condensed into many laws of the world. The black light on the halberd resonated with the laws of the world around him. It streaked across the sky in an unimaginable manner, like a dragon entering the yellow sand, or a phoenix traversing the water. This kind of feeling made people feel as if their divine power was blocked. It was extremely terrifying. The halberd was clearly still in Long Chen's hand, but it seemed to be suppressing the attacks of the three divine kings. Puff! 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 Under the suppression, the divine light in the sky turned into a boundless storm that swept in all directions. It caused a glaring light and a rumbling sound that pierced the nine heavens. It caused thunder to rumble in all directions and the earth to shake for a long time. 3 God-King level attacks were actually smashed into smithereens by this halberd. The 3 divine kings who were charging toward Long Chen stopped in their tracks and stared at him in shock. At the same time, in all directions, the countless sovereigns of the Red Moon and the remaining 4 divine kings who had yet to make a move were completely stunned. Long Chen's halberd broke the attacks of the 3 divine kings. Did he really just become a divine king? Is this guy still the one who was in the Blood Moon Well region of our clan that day? How can he have such battle strength? This guy has just become a divine king, but he can actually fight against 3 divine king elders of our clan. What kind of divine tribe is this guy? I'm afraid he's at least from the Tianyuan divine tribe with an extremely terrifying bloodline of the divine tribe. Otherwise, how can he have such battle strength? Everyone felt that what they saw in front of them was like a dream. Only the 3 divine kings who had attacked stared at the halberd in Long Chen's hand. The moment the halberd rushed out, they felt an unprecedented suppressive aura. What kind of weapon is this? What a terrifying suppressive power. It's not just the suppressive power coming from the halberd. There's also his battle technique. This battle technique seems to be extremely compatible with his halberd. As for what grade it is, I can't tell. Is this what he's relying on? This guy really does have a chance to kill me. They deeply felt the terror of the 9 heavens suppressing halberd. The power of this halberd was worlds apart from the one at the Blood Moon Well. The old woman heard the astonished words of the countless sovereigns behind her and looked at the 3 divine kings who were stunned in front of her. Her whole face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Divine power surged out of her body like a tsunami. Behind her, a blood-red light shot into the sky like moonlight. She looked like a war god who had fallen into the blood moon. She roared, "Everyone, attack and kill this man!" The blood-red light shot into the sky, and her voice spread in all directions. The sovereigns and the other 6 divine kings all trembled. Everyone shook their heads fiercely to calm themselves down. Whoosh! 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 Beams of divine light shot into the sky one after another. The sovereigns all released their divine power to the extreme. Chapter 989. The Red Moon had turned out in full force to face Long Chen. 7 God-King level powerhouses and thousands of emperors had completely annihilated him in the blink of an eye. The immeasurable emperor and Zhuzang Dizuan watched from afar, not daring to approach at all. They could only use their God-King level cultivation to protect themselves. Neither of them had any intention of leaving. They knew very well why the Red Moon had ignored them. If Long Chen had been defeated, the Red Moon would have been able to capture the 2 of them easily. The multicolored light shone like fireworks for thousands of miles as waves of divine power swept past. Rumble. The violent roar was so loud that it hurt the eardrums of the surrounding sovereigns. Under the endless attacks, a dragon's roar swept out, and a dazzling divine light rushed out from the endless multicolored light. Long Chen's inherited battle technique was used to the extreme. Nearly half of his body was shattered, and only the part of his body that had merged with the Emperor's essence was unharmed. Hiss! When Long Chen rushed out of the thousands of attacks, everyone could not help but gasp deeply. Even the old woman's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. Thousands of emperors attacked at the same time, together with 7 God-King level powerhouses, but they still could not kill him. Who crowned him? The old woman looked at Long Chen in a daze, then looked around vigilantly and muttered to herself, "Where did this person come from?" He has just become a God King level powerhouse, but he can survive the siege of so many people. I'm afraid I'll be in a worse state than him. No one dared to believe that Long Chen had just become a God King level powerhouse. Under such a terrifying attack, any God King level powerhouse would have been killed. Huff, huff, huff. While everyone was shocked, they saw Long Chen's breath was like a huge dragon's breath, and a vast vitality swept out. In the blink of an eye, his body, which had been mostly shattered, was reassembled. It seems that I've underestimated myself. Long Chen's eyes flashed. When the sky full of attacks fell, even his heart trembled, and he felt that he was going to die without a doubt. But he never thought that he would actually survive. It was only at this moment that he realized that his wrist bones, toe bones, palms, and other parts of his body had become unimaginably strong after fusing with the origin of the Sovereign Lord's body. Even such a terrifying attack couldn't hurt him at all. Second halberd, 9 heavens suppressing the great Tao. Buzz. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Long Chen's halberd moved again. An aura as vast as the sea was unleashed from the 9 heavens vanquishing halberd. The primal chaos golden codex was running wildly in Long Chen's body, as if it was affecting his soul. The halberd swept out, turning into thousands of halberds. The 7 god kings watched as the halberds descended from the sky. None of them dared to underestimate them. They all used their inherited battle techniques or soul skills. However, the countless halberds did not fall towards them. Instead, they continued to rush towards the sky. Every slash was actually aimed at the void. Crack, crack, crack. The halberds slashed at the void, but for some reason, the sound of metal clashing could be heard, followed by the sound of shattering. What is he doing? What kind of technique is this? Why do we care so much? Let's just kill him now. Let's use our soul skills and arrays to annihilate him. I want to see if he can still survive. Destroy him. Don't leave his soul behind. If he survives, he'll be a disaster sooner or later. Loud shouts rang out. No one was attacked by Long Chen's halberd. Countless soul skills and battle techniques rained down on Long Chen. The difference between this attack and the previous one was like heaven and earth. Its power was several times stronger. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Hundreds and thousands of powerhouses rushed towards Long Chen. However, their ears suddenly rang, and their souls began to tremble. For some reason, the dazzling attacks and powerful battle techniques disappeared without a trace before they could even get close to Long Chen. What's going on? Why did my battle techniques disappear completely? My soul skills and divine power also disappeared without a trace. What's going on? No, the divine power in my body is also disappearing rapidly. Terrified voices came from the mouths of countless sovereigns. However, before they could finish speaking, their eyes were already filled with blood. Long Chen rushed into the crowd with his halberd in hand. Wherever he passed, he was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. Poochie, Poochie. 4 of the 7 god kings who charged towards Long Chen spat out blood as they retreated. They stared at Long Chen, who was looking down on them with disdain. A middle-aged god king's body trembled slightly as he said, "That person's halberd phantoms weren't useless. Instead, they directly suppressed all the laws of Tao within 30,000 meters of him." The other 3 nodded as they felt lingering fear. The old woman, who had been following closely behind, also stopped in her tracks. Fortunately, we had these sovereigns with us. Otherwise, this move alone would have been enough to kill any one of us. The middle-aged god king said to the old woman. At this moment, the 7 god kings could not help but feel fear in their hearts. They had never imagined that in less than 2 months, Long Chen, who had been suppressed in every way in the Blood Moon Well, would possess such terrifying battle prowess. One after another, the sovereigns were smashed to pieces by Long Chen. Their souls were suppressed by the 9 heavens central suppression halberd. The scene was extremely shocking. In the distance, the immeasurable emperor and Juzandizuan were also completely stunned. Although they knew that Long Chen's battle prowess was heaven-defying, today, they realized that this guy was not human at all. Stop killing, stop. The old woman's voice trembled as she transmitted it to Long Chen. She clearly knew that there was no need to continue this battle. The battle prowess Long Chen had displayed was too terrifying. Even if they killed him, the Red Moon would suffer endless losses. Rumble. Long Chen's halberd shook, and a violent divine power swept out in all directions. Only then did the sovereigns who were suppressed by it retreat in horror. At this moment, he had the cultivation of a god-king. The battle prowess of the sovereigns had little effect on him. If the 7 god-kings were not afraid of death and let the sovereigns stand guard, Long Chen knew that it was still uncertain whether he would live or die today. However, in just 2 short exchanges, not only were the sovereigns scared out of their wits, but even the god-kings were stunned. The old woman stared at Long Chen, took a deep breath, and said with a pale face, "Today, the 7 of us will attack you 3 times. If you can survive, we will admit defeat. You can take whatever you want from the Red Moon, and we will let bygones be bygones for the Red Moon well. You can choose not to agree, but we will fight to the death with you." When the sovereigns heard this, they all breathed a long sigh of relief. They felt as if they had survived a disaster. The old woman's words showed that she had given in. The original battle of life and death had been brought to a level that both sides could accept. Chapter 990. The Red Moon Divine Clan and Long Chen were originally like fire and water, but now, there was an earth-shattering change. The reason was that Long Chen had become a divine king. When the old lady and the other divine kings saw Long Chen nod, they waved their hands and signaled for all the venerable sovereigns to retreat. The 7 people leaped out and still surrounded Long Chen in the center. Their expressions were ugly. Although the old lady had given in, they still wanted to kill Long Chen, so they had no choice but to retreat. Retreating like this was tantamount to humiliating the Red Moon. If they could kill Long Chen, they would be able to regain some of their dignity. The old lady nodded to the others and said in a deep voice, "Go all out and take this person's life in 3 moves." The divine kings stared at Long Chen solemnly. The onlookers all sighed. Who would have thought that their Red Moon Divine Clan would one day be turned upside down by a single person? 7 divine kings besieging one person, yet they were still so prepared. If this matter were to spread, it would probably cause a huge uproar. 3 moves. Do we really have to use that method? The divine kings looked at each other and finally looked at the old lady. The old lady nodded without hesitation. The old lady then shouted at Long Chen, "Today, I represent the Red Moon and swear to the undying Tao law that the venerable sovereigns will no longer attack you. If you can take 3 moves from the 7 of us today, all our grievances will be written off. You can take anything from the Red Moon." Long Chen snorted coldly and replied, "I also swear to the undying Tao law that as long as the venerable sovereigns of the Red Moon don't attack, I won't kill anyone else." Hearing that the 2 of them had sworn to the undying Tao law, the onlookers all breathed a sigh of relief. Only Juzan Duzuan, who was watching from afar, could not help but snort coldly and say, "These guys still want to kill Long Chen, but Long Chen can't kill anyone else. This is really unfair." The immeasurable emperor hurriedly covered his mouth and said, "That's enough. Do you really want to fight with these people? If the Red Moon loses, they will have paid enough." Buzz buzz buzz. As soon as the 2 of them finished speaking, the divine light behind the old woman turned into a bright red moon and rose into the sky. The moon flashed with divine light and there was a buzzing sound. Poo-pee-oo. When everyone looked at him, the old woman suddenly pointed at the space between his eyebrows. Then, his eyes turned blood red, and blood spurted out from his eyes onto the red moon behind him. The bright red moon instantly turned into a blood moon. Triple murder of the blood moon, fuse. The old lady's face was ferocious. Her level 3 divine king realm aura surged violently. As soon as she finished speaking, the other 6 people pushed their divine power to the maximum. Their eyes turned blood red. Other than the old woman, the other divine kings kept moving their hands on their bodies, as if they were activating some kind of terrifying Tao pattern. Long Chen stood in the center of the 7 people. His expression changed slightly. He looked up and saw that the wind around him had turned bright red. The power of the Tao Law was even more mysterious. "Hold it!" Longchen roared. The halberd in his hand stopped in midair. The wind and clouds around him stopped, and the Tao Law stopped. However, the blood-red color was still condensing. It was not affected at all. The voice of the immortal Emperor's remnant soul sounded again. "These Tao Laws are the arts in their bodies. They have been refined for hundreds of years. With your current strength, the 9 Heavens Yang Suppression Halberd is not enough to hold them back." Longchen frowned. An extremely terrifying aura instantly surrounded him. The old lady's eyes were no longer bleeding. However, her scarlet eyes were still terrifying. She stared at Longchen and hissed, "There are only 3 moves in the triple murder of the Blood Moon. You are the only person in the early Divine King realm to receive them. First murder of the Blood Moon, Heart Moon Massacre God." The old lady's voice sounded like it came from the depths of hell. However, it was filled with unprecedented confidence. As soon as she finished speaking, the space around Longchen collapsed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it turned into blood powder that filled the sky. Longchen moved his halberd to block the strange attack. However, when he reached out his hand, the blood powder disappeared into his body. Buzz! 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 The blood powder disappeared from Longchen's body. The space around him seemed to have turned into nothingness. Along with the sound of flowers blooming, illusory crimson moons appeared around Longchen. The crimson moons were as beautiful as a painting. They seemed real yet illusory. A total of 7 moons appeared around Longchen. The people who were watching from afar all retreated far away. They looked at the empty darkness and the resplendent crimson moons around Longchen. This was a technique cast by the overlaying origin energies of the 7 God Kings. Its power had reached an unbelievable level. Under the encirclement of the 7 people, Longchen seemed to be standing in a black hole. However, there were 7 crimson moons blooming around him. It was indescribably beautiful. It was truly bizarre. Longchen's body froze on the spot. The 9 Heavens Central Suppression Halberd was still in the process of being swung. His entire body seemed to have stopped at that moment. Phew! Seeing this, the old lady and the other 7 people let out a long sigh of relief. They seemed to have relaxed a little. The technique around them had yet to disperse. It seemed like they were constantly using their origin powers. The people around them were shocked by the terrifying technique of the 7 people. However, they were also extremely anxious. At this moment, if the 7 people attacked again, Longchen would definitely die. However, the 7 of them seemed to be restricted by the technique. They could not leave the spot. The hundreds of venerable sovereigns who led them knew that they were ready to make a move. The immeasurable emperor in Juzang saw this and immediately rushed out. The immeasurable emperor brought the skeletal creature with him. He exuded the aura of a divine king and said coldly, "Benefactors, don't forget the oath that the 7 of them made. If you attack, you will be breaking the oath." The faces of the venerable sovereigns darkened. Before they could say anything, one of the 7 divine kings shouted, "Just wait at the side. Since this person has already been hit by the technique, he won't have a chance to dodge the next 2 moves. Now that the 7 of us are between him and this person, with your strength, once you get close, you will die instantly." The hundreds of venerable sovereigns quickly nodded and retreated. The immeasurable emperor in Juzang stared at Longchen worriedly. At this moment, Longchen had fallen into an extremely strange state. There were 7 red moons intertwined in his divine soul, splitting his divine soul into 7 parts. Each red moon contained an unparalleled destructive intent. It seemed like they would explode at any time and tear his entire body and divine soul into pieces. Longchen looked at the 7 red moons and felt the tearing pain from his divine soul. He could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. He felt extremely lucky. These 7 people had suddenly attacked, and he really hadn't expected such a terrifying and strange attack, but fortunately, this technique was actually aimed at the soul. The existence of the Dragon Palace and the Divine Lord's remnant soul made Long Chen's divine soul almost indestructible. Chapter 991. The powerhouses of the Red Moon had gathered. Long Chen and the 7 God Kings stood where they were and did not move at all. The 7 illusory red moons still surrounded Long Chen. The 7 God Kings seemed to gradually relax, as if they were certain that Long Chen would die under this move. Puff puff puff. Under everyone's watchful eyes. As the 7 God Kings relaxed, the 7 illusory moons began to crumble rapidly, turning into red light and dissipating. Not good. The old lady was shocked and shouted, "This person seems to have a powerful soul-type artifact." Immediately use the second move. Under the old lady's command, the 7 of them quickly formed seals in their hands. Long Chen's avatar fell. As they formed their seals, Long Chen suddenly opened his eyes, and the 7 red moons around his body seemed to have lost their suppressive power. Long Chen did not dare to hesitate and quickly counterattacked. Star Attraction Primal Chaos Mantra. Long Chen's soul and divine power merged, and in the blink of an eye, he used his inherited soul skill. The night sky was dark, and endless divine power turned into stars that fell on the 7 of them, each of them containing boundless destructive intent. The large-scale soul skill completely annihilated the 7 of them, and the sovereigns around them frantically retreated. Any one of the soul skills unleashed by a God King was enough to take their lives. Blood Moon Double Kill, Moon Rebuke. The 7 of them had no intention of dodging, and their seals turned into flowing lights that blasted towards Long Chen. Buzz. The 7 seals rushed out, and Long Chen's expression changed drastically. The 7 red moons that had disappeared from his soul reappeared out of thin air. The 9 heavens suppression halberd in his hand also felt an extremely strong sense of repulsion, and it was forcibly removed from his control. At the same time, the storage ring in his hand and the artifacts he had obtained from the immeasurable emperor were all removed from his body. The divine power of the stars that filled the sky stopped in midair and flew backwards, disappearing into the boundless night sky. The old woman exhaled deeply when she saw that. Her face became even redder, and she sneered, "Even though your battle prowess is great, you're still an early God King after all. Since you've accepted the triple murder of the Blood Moon, you won't have the slightest chance to resist." A few venerable sovereigns of the Red Moon seemed to have finally remembered this technique and exclaimed, "This is the triple kill technique that was used by the elders 100 years ago." At that time, the divine king of the Jade Lion celestial race was killed by the explosion of his divine soul. The second strike has captured all of the immortal artifacts with soul imprints on them. Only death awaits him. Now, everyone finally understood why the old lady would pay such a high price to make a 3-move agreement with Long Chen. When a God King used the Blood Moon triple kill, it was enough to kill mid-God Kings. The 3 killer moves were linked together, it was a sure kill situation. When the immeasurable emperor saw that Long Chen had been subdued again, several immortal artifacts began to revolve around his right hand. Juzang Dizuan, who was beside him, turned into a ray of divine light and rushed towards the 7 God Kings. He wanted to use all his strength to break through the 7 God Kings formation and give Long Chen a chance to catch his breath. Every time the 7 God Kings subdued Long Chen, they did not make any extra moves. It was obvious that they were greatly restricted when they used this technique. The immeasurable emperor's expression changed. He did not expect Juzang Dizuan to be so reckless. Walk! The immeasurable emperor waved his right hand and more than 10 immortal artifacts flew out. They turned into purple gold chains that were as thick as buckets. At the same time, the skeletal creature behind him released the battle prowess of a God King. It immediately followed Juzang Dizuan and rushed towards the 7 God Kings. Stop them! The thousands of venerable sovereigns seemed to be prepared. They all flew up and blocked the skeletal creature and Juzang Dizuan in an instant. Before Juzang Dizuan's attack arrived, the skeletal creature had already fallen into the crowd. Dozens of venerable sovereigns were instantly blasted to pieces, but they were soon annihilated by thousands of attacks. When the 7 God Kings saw the skeletal creature being annihilated by a few venerable sovereigns, they all sneered. The old lady even said directly, "I thought everyone had the same unimaginable battle prowess as this person. He's just a skeletal god king with low intelligence. Let's get rid of this person as soon as possible. This skeletal creature is a god king after all. If we let it continue, there will be many unnecessary casualties." The immeasurable sovereign frantically activated his immortal artifacts. He actually managed to block the attacks of the people around him with his sovereign cultivation. However, in the end, he could only chant the name of Buddha and helplessly disappear. When he reappeared, he was already tens of thousands of miles away. It's not that I don't care about comradeship, but this Juzangdizuan is too rash. If I stay here any longer, I'll definitely die first. The immeasurable sovereign muttered to himself. Rumble. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw dozens of venerable sovereigns rushing towards him. He planned to let the skeletal creature take Juzangdizuan and retreat for the time being. At this moment, a loud rumble came from Long Chen's body. Everyone's attacks suddenly stopped. Countless pairs of eyes turned to look at Long Chen. The 7 God Kings' relaxed expressions disappeared. They once again stared at Long Chen as if they were facing a great enemy. Long Chen opened his eyes again. There was a strange look in his eyes. He grabbed the 9 Heaven Suppression halberd with his right hand. However, this time, he was not in a hurry to attack. He just glanced at the 7 God Kings and asked with a strange expression, "All 3 of your moves are soul attacks?" The 7 God Kings' eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Their mouths were agape. They were in disbelief. The triple murder of the blood moon that the 7 of them had performed together could not do anything to a first-level God King. They glanced back and forth at Long Chen. They seemed to be trying to find clues about Long Chen's weak divine soul. However, they soon gave up. The 2 killing techniques seemed to have only stunned Long Chen for a moment. They did not seem to have caused any harm to him. The old woman's face, which had just regained some color, drooped again. She said in a low voice, "How is this possible? How can you withstand 2 soul-killing techniques? Could it be that your divine soul also hides an unparalleled soul-suppressing artifact?" The second killing technique had clearly blasted away all the artifacts on Long Chen's body. The power of the soul-suppressing artifact was 10 times stronger than the first killing technique. They did not dare to believe that Long Chen was unscathed. Long Chen shook his head and laughed. He glanced at the God Kings. Seeing that they were shocked, he understood. The triple murder of the blood moon was a soul-killing technique. This technique was strange and unpredictable. If it was a God King, even a level 6 God King would be in danger. Although Long Chen was only a level 1 God King, he was an exception. Not to mention the God Kings, even a God Emperor would not be able to crush his divine soul. Chapter 992. Long Chen's voice reverberated, and the sovereigns around him stopped their attacks one after another. Everyone's eyes fell on Long Chen. The 7 God Kings were even more furious, as if they had been greatly insulted. Today, the 7 of them had joined forces to force a person who had just become a God King into such a situation. If this third move failed again, not only would they lose face, but the Red Moon would also be at Long Chen's disposal. Before they could say anything, Long Chen made the first move. Third halberd, border suppression. Buzz. As soon as Long Chen's voice fell, the halberd expanded in the wind. 10 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 meters, 10,000 meters, the halberd was so high that it could cover the sky. Puff puff. The endless suppressive force caused the blood and chi of the thousands of emperors around to become uncontrollably turbulent, and blood spurted out from their legs. One by one, the sovereigns knelt on the ground, each of them staring at Long Chen in horror. Several thousand Emperor Realm Masters had joined hands to block a Divine King Realm skeleton creature, but now they couldn't even stand under Long Chen's single move. The 7 God Kings let out heaven-shaking booms from their bodies. Their divine energy exploded like thunder. Use the third move with all your strength and cut off his body. I don't believe his soul can withstand the triple murder of the blood moon. The old woman saw the divine powers around her go berserk under Long Chen's halberd and became even more determined to kill Long Chen. The 7 people, including the old woman, saw that the earth-shaking halberd was about to fall and no longer hesitated, frantically urging the divine powers in their bodies. Triple murder of the blood moon, shatter the soul and destroy the body. Boom boom boom. Boom 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 boom. 7 consecutive explosions rang out as the divine powers around the 7 people gathered madly like a gushing river above Long Chen's head and turned into a red moon. Within the red moon, there seemed to be a blood-red thunderbolt collapsing, exuding a boundless power. Meanwhile, the seals in the 7 people's hands condensed once again. However, this time, the seals seemed to be more complicated than the previous 2 times. Even the 7 people's bodies were as pale as paper and on the verge of collapse. Long Chen's body suddenly stiffened in the center, and his eyes were replaced by a bright red color. If someone could observe his soul, they would discover that there were a total of 49 red moons passing through the various joints of his soul. When Long Chen saw that his spirit was being suppressed once again, he suddenly felt an unprecedented sense of fear. Oh no, these crimson moons are going to explode in my soul. Long Chen's heart trembled, and the primal chaos golden codex was once again activated to the maximum. Meanwhile, the illusory image of the Dragon Palace appeared and shook the center of his divine soul. The remnant soul of the Emperor stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Outside, the crimson moon lightning above Long Chen's head also engulfed him the moment he froze. The violent destructive power instantly tore Long Chen's body to pieces. Long Chen's figure disappeared from everyone's sight, leaving only the crimson moon that was constantly collapsing in countless pieces of flesh and blood within it. Ping ping ping. On the other side, the halberd fell like a giant mountain, directly above the heads of the 7 people. The bodies of the 3 god kings on the left of Long Chen were instantly pulverized, and nearly half of their souls were crushed. Wong wong wong. As the halberd pressed down, endless black light sprinkled from it, and wherever it passed, even the souls of god kings would be crushed. Great Elder, the 3 of us will send you away. The 3 people on the left knew that if this continued, all of them would be killed by the halberd, so they sent the old woman away with their souls. The souls of the 3 god kings were crushed, and immediately caused a violent hurricane of millions of kilometers to wreak havoc in all directions. Thousands of emperors prostrated themselves on the ground, trembling, and no one dared to release their divine sense. The death of a god king's soul was enough to shatter their divine sense. Zhuzang Dizuan and the immeasurable emperor stood behind the white bone god king, watching this scene in a daze. The power of the halberd was terrifying. The smoke and dust persisted for a full 10 breaths before it gradually dissipated, and the tide of god king's souls gradually passed. More and more emperors opened their eyes and looked at the 7 god kings and Long Chen. Under everyone's gaze, 3 of the 7 god kings had fallen, and of the other 4, only the old woman still had half a body. The 7 god kings had used all their strength to perform the triple murder of the blood moon, so they had naturally suffered an extremely terrifying backlash. It was not unreasonable for Long Chen's halberd to be able to reap such benefits. After all, this halberd was personally refined by the Emperor Lord's remnant soul, and it even contained the world suppression cauldron. Countless pairs of eyes, including the remaining 4 god kings, looked at Long Chen in unison. At this moment, the blood moon lightning had already dissipated, and only a faint blood-colored fog was left. Within the fog was a broken body. This broken body was very strange. Part of it was the bones of a hand, another part of it was the bones of a wrist, and another part of it was the toes. There were also a few pieces of flesh that were neither big nor small. Only the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzang Dizuan realized that these parts were not ordinary. These remnants of the body were the Emperor Lord's remnant soul that Long Chen had obtained. The 2 of them looked at each other, and they were extremely shocked. If this continued, Long Chen would one day replace the ancient Saint Emperor and rule the entire ancient Saint Heavenly world again. On the other side, the old woman and the others did not connect these broken bodies with the Emperor Lord's remnant soul. The old woman's hair was disheveled, and she looked like she had gone mad. Her soul frantically probed Longchen, and she screamed, "This is impossible, this is impossible." Boom! Her soul had just rushed out when it was crushed. At the same time, Longchen's broken body rapidly began to grow flesh and reform. Whoosh! The thousands of emperors were in an uproar. Under such a terrifying attack, Longchen's soul had not been destroyed, and his body had been crushed. The old woman staggered back 100 steps, and she even forgot to reform her body. She stared at Longchen in a daze. She could not believe that the third move had not only failed to kill Longchen's soul, but also failed to destroy his body. The other Divine King's remnant souls were also speechless. After Longchen's body reformed, he fell straight from the sky. His entire body was bloodless, and his eyes were even unfocused. The immeasurable emperor, the skeleton creature, and Juzan Duzuan quickly turned into a rainbow and caught Longchen. Then, he took out several artifacts and floated around Longchen. Longchen's aura was extremely weak, but he slowly looked at the old woman and said, "3 moves have passed. I can take anything from your clan. Please lead the way." The old woman's body shook, and her body gradually began to recover. She stared at Longchen for a long time, then said, "After today, please remember your oath. My clan has no more enmity with you." Chapter 993. All the people of the Red Moon could not believe that the 7 Divine Kings had been defeated. Everyone looked at Longchen with anger in their eyes. Longchen's breath was weak, but he still heard the old woman's words. He said in a deep voice, "Thank you for your reminder, but I still have to go to your tribe. Unless you want to go back on your word." Although the old woman's words were meant to remind him, she also wanted him to leave the Red Moon as soon as possible. The old woman looked at Longchen deeply, then shook her head with a bitter smile. "I have the Red Moon's origin, so I won't go back on my word. You just have to follow me into the Red Moon." She knew that everything was settled now that Longchen had won. She did not know why. At this moment, she felt a sense of relief in her heart. No matter what, we can't let this person enter the Red Moon and take it as he pleases. How can the Red Moon be humiliated like this? What undying law? Now that the ancient Divine Emperor has fallen, this oath can go to hell. Seeing that the old woman was about to bring Longchen into the Red Moon, the thousands of sovereigns were furious. Several sovereigns looked down on the undying law even more. Seeing that Longchen was weak, they were caught off guard and led many people to attack Longchen. The immeasurable emperor's face turned cold, and he was about to mobilize the white-boned Divine King behind him. Longchen put his hand on his shoulder and said weakly, "They are all people of the Red Moon, so they are bound by the undying law." At the same time, the Divine Emperor's remnant soul in Longchen's mind was filled with murderous intent, as if the words of these sovereigns were a great insult to him. Rumble. The sovereign's divine lights were crushed by an invisible force as soon as they came within 10 meters of Longchen. Crackle. At the same time, in the sky, a scarlet bolt of lightning suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It was so fast that even Longchen and the others did not have time to react. Puff 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 puff. The bodies and souls of several Emperor Realm Masters were instantly pulverized, and even their essences were forcibly extracted by the thunderbolts. The old woman and the other emperors all turned pale with fright as they stared blankly at the scarlet thunderbolt. Strong winds blew and lightning bolts took form. The Emperor Lord's shadow appeared between heaven and earth. Above his head was the sky, and under his feet were the mountains and rivers. As long as the ancient sages live, those who dare to offend the heavens shall die. Longchen and all the Red Moon members present felt a sense of arrogance, and all of them knelt on the ground. This shadow was not the real ancient Saint Emperor, but the undying Tao Law. Only the people from the Red Moon and Longchen could see it clearly. The immeasurable Emperor and Juzang Dizuan stood in place, not knowing what to do. The will of the inextinguishable law of Tao dissipated. The old woman could not help but sigh. She did not stop these people because she still had a trace of hope in her heart. Now that the killing power of the undying Tao Law had been displayed, no one dared to say anything. The ancient Saint Divine world was in chaos. The ancient Saint Emperor had fallen, and the undying Tao Law was weakening day by day. However, even a trace of its power was not something an Emperor Realm Master or even a Divine King could resist. "Can we go now?" Long Chen's voice was a little cold. The old woman nodded and led Long Chen back to the Red Moon without any hesitation. The thousands of emperors did not dare to say anything when they saw that even their essences had been destroyed by the undying Tao Law. The Emperor Lord's remnant soul murmured in Long Chen's soul, "Has the undying Tao Law become so weak? It only killed these few people. Promise me that you will cultivate and advance as fast as you can. Rebuild the ancient Saint Divine world for me." Long Chen felt the Emperor Lord's remnant soul's obsession. The ancient Saint Divine world might be everything to the ancient Saint Emperor. Long Chen did not reply, but at this moment, he felt an unparalleled burden on his shoulders, and it was not just about reviving Yi Hailan. Inside the Red Moon, Long Chen, the old woman, and the other 3 god kings came with thousands of emperors. Many people of the Red Moon rose into the air, but before they could say anything, the old woman said helplessly, "Patriarch, everyone from the main branch, please don't say anything. Just let him do whatever he wants in our clan." The man who was called the Patriarch by the old woman was actually not a god king, and his cultivation was similar to Bai Yexing's. At this moment, the man's face was extremely pale. Before Long Chen could do anything, the immeasurable emperor's eyes had already lit up. He carried Long Chen on his back and disappeared into the Red Moon with the others. After the few people left, the Red Moon's Patriarch asked word by word, "Give me an explanation." The old woman looked at the backs of Long Chen and the others and said, "This man is a god king outside of our clan. He killed 3 god kings with his own strength. He even survived the triple slaughter of the Blood Moon. I'm afraid his combat strength is not weaker than any 3rd-tier god king." The rest of the people in the Red Moon were in an uproar. Before anyone could say anything, the old woman said again, "Since we can't kill this man today, let's not provoke him anymore. Otherwise, our clan will be annihilated. This man's talent and combat strength are unheard of. Since he won this time, it may not be a bad thing for our clan to lose something and completely end our grudge. Let's leave everything to the God King of Bone Kill, the Ethereal King, and the patrolling God King." The people of the Red Moon fell silent for a moment. They had also seen the terrifying battle at the foot of the mountain, but they did not see it clearly. If everything was as the old woman said, then this was indeed a wise move for the Red Moon. Forget it. Since things have come to this, and you have sworn an oath under the inextinguishable Tao Law, let him be. The middle-aged patriarch sighed and said, "After this, our clan must not have anything to do with this man. Since the Blood Moon well has been destroyed, it may not be a bad thing for our clan to put this man in the sights of the patrolling God King." On the other side, just as the old woman said, the God King of Bone Kill and the Ethereal King led 5 God Kings of Bone Kill and 3 God Kings of Red Moon toward the Red Moon. The Ethereal King's expression was very ugly. They had been ordered by the patrolling God King to leave informants and methods of communication in many places. They had received the news as soon as Long Chen appeared. How did this guy hide? He's actually near the Red Moon. These days, the patrolling God Kings have already blocked all the roads. I didn't expect him to not only not leave, he's actually right under our noses, the Ethereal King shouted coldly. Fortunately, I've left God Kings of Bone Kill everywhere as informants. The God King of Bone Kill snorted coldly and said, "I didn't expect him to be a God King. However, since he appeared in the Red Moon, only death awaits him." Chapter 994. In the Red Moon. The people of the Red Moon clan stood outside the clan's building, and countless pairs of eyes stared at Long Chen and the others. Their eyes were wide open, and they were all trembling with anger. Even the old lady's face was flushed with anger. Cough cough. Long Chen was still carried on the back of the immeasurable emperor, but at this moment, he looked a little embarrassed. Zhuzang Dizuan followed behind him, carrying half of the red jade building on his back. The red jade building was dozens of meters tall and wide, and it was densely covered with seal patterns. Many of the higher-ups of the Red Moon walked out trembling with anger and said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency, this may not be a little too much. How did you find our clan's secret vault? How can you take it all away?" Before Longchen could speak, the immeasurable emperor said, "Why not? Since you have made an oath, we have no obligation to show mercy." Although Longchen also felt that the immeasurable emperor's actions were shameless, he did not stop him. There were many magic tools and elixirs in this secret storehouse. For the three of them, it could be considered a great opportunity. Moreover, there was no room for discussion between them and the Red Moon Divine Clan. On the other hand, the most important thing was that there was still the aura of the Emperor's remains in the vault. If Longchen guessed correctly, it should be the flesh and blood scraped from the bones of the Emperor's remains in the Blood Moon realm. Longchen patted the immeasurable Emperor's shoulder and signaled him to leave the Red Moon as soon as possible. Just as they were about to leave, the Red Moon clan leader suddenly shouted, "Wait, Your Excellency left a part of the secret vault. I can tell you part of the information about the Bone-Killed Divine King and the Ethereal King. They must be coming here now. Now that you have made such a big move, it is impossible for them to hide." Longchen stopped and frowned. How long will it take for them to get here? Where are they from? How strong are they? The people of the Red Moon made it clear that the God-Killing King and the Ethereal King did not swear an oath to join the Red Moon, so they could not be considered as people of the Red Moon. The fact that Honghua mentioned the two of them was enough to show that they must have unparalleled fighting strength. Seeing that Longchen had agreed, the Red Moon clan leader let out a long sigh of relief. There were close to 60% of the Red Moon's resources in this secret vault. If he really took all of them away, it would be no different from a serious injury. Su-hun had the fighting strength of a level 3 God King. That God King Gu-Kil was also a level 3 God King. With your current fighting strength, those white bone God Kings might not amount to much. But he still has the patrolling Divine King's formation flag. It's something the Zhuge Jinshan clan personally gave to the patrolling Divine King. You won't be able to survive if he uses it with the strength of a level 3 Divine King. After they went to the people of Baishan, they searched every nook and cranny for you. The patrolling God King has even sealed off the entire area. It should take him about 4 days to get here. The man said a few words, then stopped abruptly. He was very sure of what he was doing. Longchen stared at the man and could not help but laugh. Not only was this man's cultivation base and age almost the same as Bai Yeshing, but he was also quite experienced in being the clan leader. Longchen nodded and said, "Let's go first. If what you say is important enough, I will keep half of this secret vault." The person immediately smiled and replied, "With your current battle prowess, you can put up a fight against either God King Bone Kill or God King Void Soul. I have 3 options for you to choose from. You will know how important they are when you hear them. First, you can offer a humble apology. You and the patrolling God King have not fought to the death yet. With your fighting strength, as long as you are willing to submit, it is not impossible for you to drop the matter. Second, you can go to the northwest and break through the forbidden God Yuzei instead of leaving. Third, you can use your speed to break through the area sealed off by the patrolling God King before they catch up with you and continue to the central area of Zhong Province." The Red Moon nodded slightly when they heard the man's words. Most of them felt that the first option was the most feasible. The Red Moon did not pursue the matter of him breaking the Blood Moon well, and the 7 patrolling statues were still in the hands of the patrolling God King. There was no deep hatred between the two. Otherwise, it would not be just God King Gu-Kil and the Ethereal King who were chasing after Longchen. The fighting strength Longchen showed today was really terrifying. If he met the patrolling God King and submitted to him, everything would be solved. After hearing the 3 suggestions, Longchen finally nodded. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the halberd in his right hand left his hand and chopped down on the secret storehouse behind Juzang Dizuan. Rumble. The secret storehouse, which was covered in Dao patterns, was cut into 2 from the middle. The hundreds of magic tools inside glowed brightly and condensed. On the left side of the secret storehouse, there was a pile of sparkling flesh and blood. "Let's go." Longchen looked at the immeasurable emperor's pained and regretful expression and patted him on the shoulder. "What a wastrel." The immeasurable emperor brought Longchen and sped away, looking back every 3 steps. The Red Moon Clan leader looked at the half of the secret storehouse and finally understood why the old woman had decided not to have anything to do with Longchen. The secret storehouse was covered in sealing runes and could be said to be indestructible. With one swing of the halberd, it had been reduced to such a state. After Longchen left, the Red Moon Clan leader gestured to the people in the clan to rebuild the secret storehouse as soon as possible. Many people from the main branch walked to his side and said, "Clan leader, do you think this person will really choose the first path?" The Red Moon Clan leader shook his head and said, he was originally facing the east, but suddenly turned back. He chose the second path. The divine kings around him froze, as if they did not expect Longchen to choose to go to the Forbidden God Yuzei. The Forbidden God Yuzei was the only way to the Zhuge Forbidden God clan. It was extremely dangerous, but it had the miraculous effect of eliminating all divine soul power. Going deep into this place could greatly reduce the combat power of the Ethereal King, and it could also suppress the formation flags that the patrolling Divine King had given to the two of them. A few Divine Kings said in a low voice, "This person is going to the Forbidden God Yuzei, and it bodes ill." The old lady also nodded and said, "This person's combat power is monstrous, but whether or not he can win against Divine King Bonekill and the Divine King, it's equivalent to completely breaking ties with the patrolling Divine King. Going deep into the Forbidden God Yuzei, he can't go to the Zhuge Forbidden God clan. It's a dead end." After Longchen left, the Red Moon gradually quieted down. 3 days later, Divine King Bonekill came with the Ethereal King and the others. The formation flag spirit beside Divine King Bonekill floated in the air above the Red Moon, and said in a gloomy voice, "Longchen is not in the Red Moon?" The patriarch of the Red Moon God clan rose to his feet and glanced at the spirit of the formation flag. He lowered his posture and bowed, "Longchen has killed 3 of our God Kings. He's already on his way to the Forbidden God Rain Marsh." Chapter 995. God King Gukil and the Ethereal King looked at each other. Although they knew that Longchen had become a God King, they did not expect him to be able to escape from the Red Moon. The two did not stop for even a moment and were about to continue their pursuit of Longchen in the Forbidden God Water Marsh. But before they could move, the clan leader of the Red Moon Divine Clan said in a deep voice, "The 2 of you should go and hunt him down yourselves. The members of my clan will no longer participate in anything related to Longchen." After that, the old lady came behind him and motioned for the people of the Red Moon behind God King Gukil and the Ethereal King to return to the clan. Although the 3 Red Moon God Kings and 1 or 2,000 sovereigns were confused, they could only obey the order and return to the Red Moon. The Ethereal King snorted coldly and said, "What is the meaning of this?" The old lady stared at the two and replied in a deep voice, "Although the 2 of you have an agreement with our clan, you are not one of us. If you want to continue the pursuit, just go ahead. Our clan has already sworn that we will no longer be enemies with Longchen." The Ethereal King's face was pale and his divine power fluctuated. Just as he was about to speak, he was stopped by God King Gukil, who said in a deep voice, "Let's go. Since they have already sworn, it is useless to say anything more. Pursuing Longchen is an urgent matter." The two led the 5 white bone God Kings behind them and flew towards the northwest. Halfway there, Godly King Gukil said, "Longchen has a huge secret and we can't underestimate him. However, if we capture him, the 2 of us may have endless opportunities." Indeed. The Ethereal King had now calmed down and replied in a deep voice, "This person had just become a sovereign in the North Foot territory. At that time, we could have killed him with a single thought. Even if he has many opportunities, it is impossible for him to become a God King and kill 3 God Kings of the Red Moon." The two said and looked at each other. They saw a hint of horror in each other's eyes. They thought of the Sovereign Lord's body that Longchen had taken away from the Blood Moon Well. If Longchen could really merge with the Emperor Lord's body, then everything would make sense. After the shock, their palms were covered in sweat due to their excitement, and their bodies couldn't help but tremble slightly. They didn't even manage to say anything. However, the two of them knew that if their guess was correct, once they killed Longchen, they would obtain an unprecedented opportunity. How mysterious was the monarch's body? It was rumored that within the Central State, there were heaven-defying geniuses from the Tianyuan divine race that could rely on this item to bring along the inextinguishable Tao Law and compete with the heavens and earth, shaking the heavens and shaking the earth. Of course, they had only heard a little about these things. In the past, it was not that they had not studied the remains of the Emperor Lord. But to them, although the Imperial Lord's body was quite useful, they couldn't fuse with it at all. They even had to use a great deal of their strength to fill the Blood Moon Well. If this person really is what we think, why would he need the power of the Blood Moon Well? God King Bonekill's voice was filled with excitement. After the two of them finished speaking, their speed increased once again as they rushed towards the forbidden God Yuzei. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. As Longchen, the immeasurable emperor, and the others rushed forward, the forbidden God Yuzei had already appeared in their sights. Along the way, with the support of the Red Moon's secret treasury, Longchen's situation had gradually improved. However, as the Red Moon's clan leader had said, since they had appeared, it was impossible for them to hide again. These days, almost an endless stream of skeletal creatures had been killed by them, as well as many low-level Earth-type spirit souls. These creatures did not have the slightest bit of combat power, but they stubbornly followed the tracks of Longchen and the others. Is that the forbidden God Yuzei? Juzang Dizuan looked at the endless rain clouds in front of him in a daze. The rain clouds pressed down, and raindrops as dense as needles fell from above. On the ground, there were potholes and swamps nearby, and lakes and swamps in the distance. Longchen had heard of this place and the people of Baishan, but at that time, he did not associate this place with the Zhuge Forbidden God clan. Before Longchen and the others stepped into the rain swamp, the Emperor's remnant soul said, "The rain formation here is almost a world of its own. With your current cultivation level and divine power, you will not be able to break it. You have to be very careful." Longchen nodded when he heard this. He knew what the Emperor's remnant soul meant. The Forbidden God Yuzei was too big, and it was built by the Zhuge Forbidden God clan. Even though the Emperor's remnant soul could see the flaws in the formation, it would take him at least a few years to break it with his current cultivation level of level 1 Divine King. The immeasurable Emperor beside him also seemed to be afraid of the rain swamp. He grabbed with his right hand, and several talismans flew out from his Dao ring. Each talisman had the power of a magic weapon. Juzang Dizuan saw this and could not help but snort coldly. "You almost escaped when Longchen was fighting with his life on the line. Now that I am carrying the secret vault, you have taken nearly 70% of the magic weapons in it." The immeasurable Emperor coughed twice, but his expression did not change at all. He said, "Benefactor, you may not know this, but the relationship between this poor monk and Longchen is not something that can be bound by life and death. If he had died that day, I would have worked hard to cultivate and avenge him. Then, I would have killed myself in front of his grave." Longchen heard this and slapped him hundreds of meters away. He smiled and said, "You are the first person who can make such a refreshing and refined story." That being said, Longchen actually knew the situation at that time. Juzang Dizuan's reckless attack was led by the Red Moon. The immeasurable Emperor's retreat at that time was also a wise move. Longchen turned to Juzang Dizuan and said, "You should learn more from this damn bald donkey. Staying alive is the most important thing." Juzang Dizuan snorted coldly, but turned a deaf ear. Longchen smiled bitterly. Although he had the cultivation of a divine king, this Juzang Dizuan did not have the slightest intention of giving him face. Juzang Dizuan had been in the hands of the Nine Treasures Divine King for too long in the Nine Treasures realm. Any teaching words would be met with resistance from him. Puff, puff, puff. While the two were talking, they saw that the talismans thrown by the immeasurable emperor all spontaneously combusted and turned into powder. The immeasurable emperor's expression suddenly became serious. He said, "Are we really going to enter the forbidden God Yuzei? There are a total of 308,000 formations inside, and each of them is formed by the Tao of Rain. The danger inside is probably no less than the formation flags in the hands of the divine king of Bone Kill." After that, before Longchen could say anything, the immeasurable emperor seemed to have suddenly thought of something and hurriedly said, "Since the matter here is settled, let's take a detour and not pass by the Zhuge Forbidden God clan. This clan doesn't look easy to deal with." Chapter 996. The Forbidden God Yuzei. The Zhuge Jinshan clan built a place of suppression at the weakest point of the clan. Even though this place was within the central continent, even godly kings would have to think twice before going to the Zhuge Jinshan tribe from here. Longchen led the immeasurable emperor and Juzan Dizuan straight into the Forbidden God Yuzei. As soon as they stepped into the Forbidden God Yuzei, they felt a strong suppression around them. Even Longchen's Jiutsang Yang halberd could not help but emit waves of black light, as if it was resisting the suppression. Pa pa pa. After they entered the Forbidden God Yuzei, they soon heard many skeletal creatures dying behind them. These skeletal creatures were originally following Longchen, but as soon as they got close to the Forbidden God Yuzei, the green light in their eyes would instantly shatter. The closer we go to the northwest, the stronger the formation gets. Let's go deeper, Longchen said to the two. The immeasurable emperor and the others were sweating, but they agreed and followed closely behind. The few of them flew. When they passed by a lake, Longchen suddenly led them to take a detour. But as soon as they took a few steps, they saw Juzan Dizuan step into a puddle. Whoosh whoosh. Two pairs of crystal hands in the puddle instantly grabbed his ankles. The crystal hands were tightly attached to an inch-long wrist. When the hands grabbed his ankles, the wrist began to elongate at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the hands swept along his ankles, past his knees, and fell toward his dantian and between his eyebrows. Juzan Dizuan was instantly drenched in cold sweat. But for some reason, he felt like he was being pressed down by a ghost and could not move an inch. Boom boom boom. In the nick of time, Longchen's halberd fell. With a flash of black light, it directly cut Juzan Dizuan's waist and abdomen in half. The immeasurable emperor also reacted quickly, pulling Juzan Dizuan's upper body to the side. Juzan Dizuan's face was pale, his breathing was chaotic, and he stared at the puddle. Longchen's halberd shook, and he shouted at Juzan Dizuan, "Quickly condense your body." Juzan Dizuan's eyes focused, and he quickly began to condense his body that was cut by Longchen. In the puddle, the two hands actually tore his body into powder in an instant, and the blood that fell into the puddle vaguely expanded a little. When Longchen saw this, he said in a deep voice, "All of you should be careful. There are too many water element formations here. They are ever-changing. I can't detect them all in advance." The Emperor's remnant soul did not care about the suppressive force here, but it could not guarantee that everyone would be able to make an instant judgment. The immeasurable Emperor looked at Juzan Dizuan's appearance and pondered for a moment. The two of us should walk around the periphery of the Forbidden God Water Marsh. After all, it's much safer there. If you continue to go deeper into the Forbidden God Water Marsh alone, you won't have to worry about anything. The immeasurable Emperor's words shocked Longchen and Juzan Dizuan, but they immediately nodded. The immeasurable Emperor's words were reasonable. Not to mention the immeasurable Emperor, even Juzan Dizuan would lose his life if he was careless. If Longchen had not reacted in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Moreover, the aura of the Divine King-level skeleton creature was getting weaker and weaker, and even the green light in its eyes began to flicker from time to time. The suppressive force of the Forbidden God Water Marsh on the Divine Soul was really terrifying. This was the reason why the Red Moon Patriarch suggested Longchen to go deeper into the Forbidden God Water Marsh. Longchen held the Nine Heavens suppression halberd in his hand and had the help of the Emperor's remnant soul. If he went alone, he was 80 to 90% confident that he would not be afraid of anything. Longchen nodded and instructed the immeasurable emperor and Juzangdizuan, "The two of you go northeast. When you get close to the edge of the forbidden god water marsh, go north and do your best to ensure your safety." The immeasurable emperor nodded and handed a white jade ring to Longchen, saying, "This ring is a derivative of my Dao ring. It can sense where I am within 10 million miles. Keep it." Longchen took the ring, and the immeasurable emperor took Juzangdizuan and went diagonally behind. After the two of them left, Longchen took a deep look at the puddle, and then his gaze fell on the lake that they had just gone around. The halberd in his hand suddenly shot out a black light into the lake. Rumble. The black light fell into the lake, and suddenly, there were tens of thousands of threads of Dao Law that bloomed with a monstrous light. The entire lake came to life. The lake, which was close to 10,000 meters long, turned into a giant monster. Countless water pillars were like its feet, surging and roaring. The water pillars were intertwined with Dao Law and shot out from its huge mouth, attacking Longchen. Wherever it passed, the rain swamp that filled the sky continued to increase its power. Longchen's halberd shot up into the sky like a rainbow. The black light was like a tide, shattering hundreds of water pillars. He used the force to fly backward and plunged into the depths of the forbidden god water marsh. Along the way, he triggered many water-type formations, causing quite a commotion. On the other side, just 2 days after entering the forbidden god water marsh, the ethereal king and the godly king of bone slaughter arrived outside the forbidden god water marsh. Seeing the power of the forbidden god water marsh, the ethereal king frowned. He cultivated the path of the spirit and had not even formed a physical body. Entering this place was no different from being restrained everywhere. The godly king of bone slaughter was the same. The green light in his eyes was like fire, and he was a little wary of the forbidden god Yuzei. Is this the forbidden god Yuzei? Looking at this place today, it's a little scary. This place is really unfavorable for us. The godly king of bone slaughter said in a deep voice. The ethereal king nodded and replied after a while, "There are too many strange things about this person. We can't underestimate him. Since he could kill 3 red moon godly kings and escape unscathed, it's enough to prove that he does have the strength to kill the two of us." Buzz buzz buzz. While the two were hesitating, the earth-type array flag spirit behind the godly king of bone slaughter suddenly appeared. The array flag spirit was earthy yellow, and a human-like disdainful smile appeared on its face. "Is that all you've got? This place may have some suppressive power against the other 4 array flag spirits, but it doesn't have much effect on me." After that, the array flag spirit moved, and 2 earth-yellow Dao patterns fell into the brilliance of the forbidden god Yuzei. The muddy pond water in the forbidden god water marsh disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, revealing the yellow soil underneath. The godly king of bone slaughter's expression changed. He just remembered that the array flag spirit in his hand was the earth-type array flag spirit. Earth can cover water. This item was also an item of the Juga forbidden god tribe, and the restraints here were not as terrifying as imagined. Chapter 997. The Forbidden God Water Swamp was a place rarely visited by humans. Many of those who came to the central region from the other realms were either accepted through the palace examination or continued on their way to the center of the central region. However, almost no one would choose to go through the Forbidden God Water Swamp. There were a few people who tried to enter, but there was no news of them in the end. It was said that those who could pass through the Forbidden God Water Swamp and enter the land of the Zhuge Jinshan clan would have a chance to be accepted into the clan and granted the divine race's origin. However, no one had successfully passed through the Forbidden God Water Swamp since its appearance. Inside the Forbidden God Water Swamp, Longchen didn't stop walking. He had also shaken off the mighty power of the array formation behind him in the past 2 days. The existence of the Emperor Lord's remnant soul allowed him to avoid most of the danger. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to ensure that the immeasurable Emperor and Juzangdizuan would not be hunted down by the bone-killed Divine King and the others, he would not have attracted these rain swamp beasts. "Master, how about we face the enemy here?" Longchen suddenly stopped and asked the Emperor Lord's remnant soul with his thoughts. Longchen's eyes could see 1,000 meters away. 5 small streams surrounded an ice pool like stars surrounding the moon. Cold air lingered above the ice pool like smoke, but the smoke fell into the streams and circulated in a cycle. Looking at the source of the streams, one could see that the 5 streams were formed by the dense raindrops that constantly fell from the sky. This scene made Longchen recall the scene when he and Zhang Lanhua pledged their love at the 9 Yang God clan. It was truly magnificent. However, this place was filled with killing intent. Longchen stood there for a long time before the Emperor Lord's remnant soul said in a deep voice, "No, although this place is enough to kill the 2 of them, there are 490 origin killing arrays in each lake. Once this place is activated, there is a 70 to 80% chance that you will be killed here. Moreover, to see all the changes inside and ensure that you can protect yourself in the array, it will take at least an entire day." Longchen frowned and said, "The deeper you go into the rain swamp, the scarier it is. There won't be a more suitable place to continue." Although the Forbidden God swamp was filled with dense vegetation, Longchen was 90% confident that he could reach the Zhuge Forbidden God tribe through this place. However, this was the best place to kill the God King of Bone Kill and the Ethereal King. On the other hand, he did not intend to enter the Zhuge Jinshan clan. The Sovereign Lord's remnant soul understood the meaning behind Longchen's words and said, "If you insist, then do it now. I will try my best to deduce where most of the life force lies. This Zhuge Forbidden God's lineage should be of the same origin as the God race born from chaos. Otherwise, this formation Tao would not have such terrifying sealing intent." For the Emperor Lord's remnant soul to give such an evaluation, it was enough to show how terrifying the array formation within the Forbidden God Yuzhe was. Longchen's speed was extremely slow. He gradually approached the 5 creeks and ice ponds. The remnant soul of the monarch spread out as much as possible, trying to deduce the Tao law within. 3 days later, under the lead of the Earth Element Formation Flag Spirit, the God King of Bone Kill and the Ethereal King were not any slower than Longchen. However, their speed seemed to be getting slower as they went deeper into the Forbidden God swamp. "It's right ahead. This person can actually reach the Forbidden God Yuzhe. If it wasn't for the many traces he left along the way, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to reach here." The God King of Bone Kill was shocked. As soon as he said that, the Ethereal King's eyes glowed as he stared into the distance. The next moment, both of their gazes landed on Longchen's body. The Ethereal King frowned and said to the God King of Bone Kill in a deep voice, "Let's end this quickly. This person is not to be underestimated." The God King of Bone Kill nodded slightly. He did not intend to underestimate the enemy at all. On the other hand, the formation flag spirit behind the God King of Bone Kill said impatiently, 2 third-level God Kings are afraid of a first-level God King? Let's quickly kill this person and report back. The Forbidden God Yuzhe's suppression of the soul body's divine sense is making me feel extremely uncomfortable. The God King of Bone Kill nodded and was still on guard. Seeing this, Longchen could not help but smile bitterly in his heart. These 2 were third-level God Kings, but they were still so cautious when facing a first-level God King. It was really difficult to deal with them. "Ethereal King, as the guardian of the Northfoot territory, you have slaughtered almost all the sovereigns and emperors under you. Today is the day you pay the price." Longchen waved his right hand and the 9 heavens suppression halberd appeared in his hand. The Ethereal King suddenly realized and seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly laughed and said, "You want revenge, is it because of Sovereign Zhang Quan? If you hadn't mentioned it, I would have almost forgotten." After that, 5 skeletal creatures stood behind the Ethereal King and the God King of Bone Kill, each of them having the battle strength of a God King. Using their lives in exchange for 5 God King powerhouses, this is a very good deal. As the Ethereal King's voice fell, soul whips in his right hand tore through the air and fell on Longchen. Wherever the soul whips passed, they affected the surrounding divine power sources and emitted a glaring black light. This attack was not powerful and seemed to be probing. The two did not even approach Long Chen. Bang! The Nine Heavens suppression halberd in Long Chen's hand shook and he went into a defensive posture. The void soul whips did not slow down at all. They passed through the Nine Heavens suppression halberd and sank into Long Chen's body. Before the Ethereal King and the God King of Bone Kill could rejoice, they saw Long Chen's figure disappear without a trace. However, the void soul whips he struck out fell straight behind Long Chen. The whips fell. The Ethereal King and the God King of Bone Kill's expressions changed drastically. They knew that this was not good and quickly retreated. Rumble. The rain pool rolled down in all directions and it actually produced a deafening explosion. The scene in front of their eyes changed rapidly as if another curtain had opened in the sky. 5 small streams and a vast ice pool appeared. Long Chen was standing on the surface of the ice pool. However, the place where he was standing now was more than 10 meters away from the previous apparition. The Void Soul Death God and the God King of Bone Kill's figures suddenly stopped. The unparalleled rain pool suppression power instantly covered their bodies. The God King of Bone Kill stared at Long Chen and said with a trembling voice, "Are you using your life to trick us? I want to see if you die first or we die first." The two had already felt the terrifying rain pool Dao pattern power, but they never thought that Long Chen would actually lure them to attack the formation. It was not that they were not careful enough, but they never thought that Long Chen would actually stand on the ice pool. Otherwise, a mere apparition would not be able to fool them. The Ethereal King's face was extremely pale. He only felt that he had been greatly insulted. Chapter 998. There was an ice pool and 5 streams, all of them emitting a brilliant azure light. In the blink of an eye, countless terrifying attacks landed on the Ethereal King and the Bone Kill Divine King. At the same time, a boiling and violent stream soared into the sky, dispersing tens of thousands of miles high in the sky and converging with the endless raindrops in the rain swamp. Crack, crack, crack. The boiling stream emitted an endless power of ice, instantly sealing the area within hundreds of thousands of miles around the 3 of them. At this moment, if one were to look down from the sky, they would clearly see a semisphere made of crystal clear ice armor covering the 3 of them. Long Chen frowned slightly when he saw this. The reason why the 2 of them attacked him without suspecting him was because he was also in the formation and was extremely close to the figure. Although he had the upper hand, he was also in the formation. Rumble. The ice pool shook and the Tao laws around it shone with dazzling divine light. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a giant beast. This beast had 3 heads, a long neck like a snake, and a face like a dragon. Its entire body was covered in blue ice scales, looking extremely ferocious. Long Chen was now standing on its back. Long Chen felt his hair stand on end. He quickly flew away, only to see that his feet were already covered in ice. Roar! After the ice beast died, the Tao patterns on its scales were faintly discernible. They were so densely packed that it was frightening. The beast ignored Long Chen behind it and immediately looked into the distance. The place where it landed was where the Bone Kill Divine King and the Ethereal King were. With a loud roar, countless icicles and spears condensed in the beast's 3 heads and landed on the Bone Kill Divine King and the Ethereal King. Every spear and icicle seemed ordinary, but there were Tao patterns imprinted on them as they flew through the air. If someone was proficient in water-type formations, they would realize that the Tao patterns on the spears contained endless sealing power. Every spear probably contained unfathomable power. The Bone Kill Divine King and the Ethereal King's expressions changed drastically. The Bone Kill Divine King opened his mouth, and countless skeletons expanded into tens of thousands and charged toward the spears. At the same time, the Bone Kill Divine King's skeletons expanded rapidly, reaching tens of thousands of feet in the blink of an eye. The Ethereal King also shook his body, and his divine spirit body turned into tens of thousands of illusory images. On the other side, Long Chen wasn't having a good time either. Out of the 5 streams, 2 of them swallowed him when he landed. Countless Tao pattern array formations bombarded him with their killing power. Of course, compared to God King Boneskill and God King Void Soul, the pressure Longchen faced was less than 1/100th. Outside the forbidden divine marsh, the divine king of heaven, the patrolling of God's divine king, was divine king's divine king. The divine king, as the patrolling divine king, suddenly opened his eyes. His face was as cold as snow. It's the God-sealing water marsh. Someone has actually tried to destroy the God-sealing water marsh. With that, the patrolling God King vanished, of people of. In just 2 days. 2 days later, the divine king arrived at the Red Moon. The Red Moon clan leader and many other divine kings came to greet him. The divine king frowned and said, "I can sense the aura of my Earth Array flag spirit here. Did Divine King Bonekill return not long ago? Did he catch Longchen?" The Red Moon clan leader shook his head respectfully and replied, "We did not catch Longchen, but it shouldn't take long. They should all be in the Forbidden Divine Marsh now. Once they enter the Forbidden Divine Marsh, Longchen will have no way out." The divine king's eyes narrowed. He stared at the Red Moon clan leader and asked, "Did you tell him to go to the Forbidden Divine Marsh?" The Red Moon clan leader nodded. The divine king snorted and disappeared from the Red Moon. The clan leader of the Red Moon divine race watched the patrolling divine king leave and muttered to himself, "You can't blame me for this. You chose this path yourself. I gave you 3 choices, but you chose the Forbidden God Water Marsh. If you are lucky, go through the marsh and go to the Zhuge Forbidden Divine Marsh." The God Kings behind the clan leader of the Red Moon Divine Clan, led by the old woman, nodded one after another, as if they were very much in agreement with his actions. When Longchen went to the Forbidden Divine Marsh, the Red Moon clan leader did not violate their oath and flatter the divine king. Just as Longchen said, the Red Moon clan leader and the people of Baiyishan clan leader, Baiyeshing, were the same kind of people. Everyone looked at the place where the Forbidden Divine Marsh was located. They all wanted to know what the current situation was like. Forbidden Divine Marsh. After 2 days, Longchen finally broke free from the suppression of the 2 streams. However, half of his body was sealed by the power of ice. He was covered in ice shards. Even his divine power couldn't do anything to him. In this situation, the Imperial Lord's remnant soul kept helping him find the weak points in the formation. Just as the Imperial Lord's remnant soul said. The formations here were too complicated and there were too many of them. Even if he told Longchen, with Longchen's current cultivation, he could not react in time. In comparison, the Divine King of Bonekill and the Ethereal King were also in a sorry state. There were hundreds of cracks on God King Bonecrusher's skeletal body, and within those cracks, one could see droplets of water flowing out. The Ethereal King's soul was also blue. It was as if he was standing in the sea. The 2 looked at the giant beast in front of them and trembled. They stared at Longchen and said, "There are still many formations here. Let's see if you dare to trigger them." The ice barrier around them still did not disappear. It was as if the 3 of them were trapped here, and it was impossible for them to leave in a short period of time. The Divine King of Bonekill and the Ethereal King did not dare to rashly attack Longchen at this moment. That day in the Blood Moon Well, they had seen the terror of Longchen's formation. Now, after being tricked once, they were more and more afraid. "Earth Formation Spirit, what are you waiting for?" The moment the Divine King of Bonekill's voice fell, the Earth Formation flag behind him snorted coldly and flew away. The formation flag swayed, and a strong aura covered the sky. Even though this was the Forbidden God Water Marsh, countless dust could be seen flying under the ground. Earth Waterfall Splitting Formation. The spirit of the Earth-type array flag seemed to be restrained by the Water-type array formation here as well. The divine light it emitted was rather weak, but its might was still extremely shocking. For giant mountains fell from the sky and the earth toward Longchen. Endless sand and dust covered them in an instant. If one looked carefully, they would find that the sand and dust were condensed by formation Tao patterns. It was similar to the forbidden God water marsh. Long Chen's expression changed greatly, but he could not help but shake his head. The two were too cautious. In fact, their worries were not misplaced. Now Long Chen was standing at the center of a formation. This was also a place he had prepared a few days ago. Once the two approached, he would directly activate the seal formation around him, but he could stay out of it. This is really troublesome. Chapter 999. Vast and mighty power trembled as the Earth Elemental Array Flag Spirit unleashed a violent array formation that descended on Long Chen. Long Chen's halberd flew out of his hand and swept past the area covered by the array formation. The Bone-Kill God King and the Ethereal King looked as if they were facing a formidable enemy. They were extremely nervous and did not underestimate Long Chen at all. Rumble. When the halberd flew past them, the two of them frowned and became even more serious. The halberd was not aimed at the two of them, but at a huge rock to their right. The 9 firmament suppression halberd possessed terrifying power, but when it landed on the huge rock, it only made a series of rumbling sounds. The halberd struck the huge rock, but the huge rock did not shatter. The Bone-Kill God King and the Ethereal King's expressions changed drastically. Where the huge rock and the halberd met, Taoist rhymes flowed out like a river. Wherever the Taoist rhymes passed, endless killing intent rippled in the air. This strike once again triggered a boundless killing formation. The killing array covered the area where the three of them were. Every streak of water swamp power turned into thin ice blades and turned into a storm that swept across the area. When the Bone-Kill God King saw this, he immediately waved at the Earth-type array flag spirit and shouted, "Quickly come back and protect the two of us." As soon as he finished speaking, the spirit of the Earth-type array flag merely turned around and sneered. It continued to attack Long Chen. "My order is to help the two of you capture this person or kill him. Your lives and deaths have nothing to do with me." The Bone-Kill God King was flustered and exasperated, but there was nothing he could do. The two of them exploded with all their strength at the same time and unleashed their origin soul skills and battle techniques. On the other side, Long Chen stood in the same spot from the beginning to the end, allowing the Earth-type array flag's attack to come at him. Numerous mountains and gravel cascaded down and buried Long Chen's body. The Earth-type spirit revealed a smug look. Although he did not know why Long Chen did not dodge, he believed that Long Chen would definitely die under this attack. The vast and mighty water swamp killing formation and the majestic Earth elemental formation intertwined with each other. The azure light and the earth and yellow light were like a beautiful flower scroll. Looking down from the sky, only the Earth array flag and the 9 heavens halberd were not attacked by the killing array. The rest of the area was almost completely covered. The multicolored light that filled the sky disappeared, but the deafening roar did not stop for a long time. After an entire 15 minutes, the sky finally recovered its calm, and the terrifying water attribute Tao pattern started to cease its banners and drums. Both God King Bonecrusher and Ethereal King suffered a devastating blow. These array formation Tao patterns directly bombarded the origin. Under the indiscriminate attack, there was no way to avoid it. The bones of the Bone-Kill God King were like a sieve riddled with holes, and the green light in his eyes would occasionally dissipate like a thin mist. In comparison, the Ethereal King was in an even worse state. His entire divine soul was as thin as a piece of paper, and his divine power was so weak that it was shocking. On the other side, Long Chen's appearance was much better. Close to 60% of his physical body was destroyed, but his divine power origin was still turbulent. The earth Tao law around his body was still moving, but with a shake, it disappeared without a trace. When God King Bonecrusher and Ethereal King saw this, they could not help but say in a deep voice, "You actually chose to take the Earth Array Flag's spirit head-on. The Water Swamp Killing Formation's spirit's power is not far from it. You can even find the only life source of this killing array. No wonder you dare to enter the Forbidden God Water Swamp." As the two of them spoke, they were already extremely shocked. The Forbidden God Water Swamp was such a complicated array formation Tao pattern. Even though God King Bonecrusher was proficient in array formations, he could not touch the tip of the iceberg. However, Longchen could find the life source of the array formation. God King Bonecrusher stared at the Earth Array Flag's spirit in the distance and could not help but shout, "Stupid thing. When the spirit is still here, the spirit, in his opinion." If the Earth Array Flag's spirit had protected the two of them with the power of the Array Flag, they would not have been so severely injured. Although the Earth Array Flag's spirit did not have a physical body and was similar to the Ethereal King, his face had turned very pale. He stared at Longchen and could not believe what had happened. Although Longchen was severely injured by the Array Flag's attack, his foundation was not damaged. This attack had once killed a second-stage God King. What is this guy's physical body made of? How can he remain unscathed after such an attack? The Earth Array Flag snorted coldly. His words made God King Bonecrusher and the Ethereal King, who were faintly retreating, suddenly stop in their tracks. God King Bonecrusher's eyes were fixed on Longchen's broken body. That is. God King Bonecrusher's pupils constricted. His body, which was riddled with holes, emitted a monstrous divine light once again. The Ethereal King's expression was also extremely hot. There was no way he would mistake those wrist bones and other things. Back then, when these things were used in the Blood Moon Well, he had personally spent countless efforts to carve Tao patterns on them and smelt the death aura. The Red Moon might not be able to recognize them, but he was very clear about them. These were the Thearka's broken body. God King Bonecrusher and the Ethereal King looked at each other. Although they did not say anything, they could see the madness in each other's eyes. Originally, they still had some doubts and did not want to continue taking the risk. However, there was no longer any hesitation. Longchen could definitely fuse with the Thearka's broken body. This person's growth is unimaginable. If you and I don't get this opportunity today, we will never be able to take him down in this lifetime, God King Bonecrusher murmured. The Ethereal King nodded and said, "We originally planned to retreat, but it seems like there is no need for that now. This person is just as we guessed. If we want to kill him in the future, I'm afraid we will still die." After the two finished speaking, their bodies began to emit rays of light. The white light condensed like a tide and did not dissipate. The light of their divine souls was both real and illusory. The two of them began to fuse at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the 5 white bone puppets behind them also quickly melted into the brilliance. Longchen looked at the two's strange movements and finally began to move. He flew up and stepped on the water swamp. Every step he took seemed to be on the array pattern. Seeing this, the Earth-type array flag suddenly roared and the array flag whistled, setting off gusts of wind and sand. Although the Tao Law and array formation emitted by the Earth-type array flag were very similar to the Forbidden God Water Swamp, the two were suppressed because of their different origins. Bang bang bang. The Earth-type array flag attacked Longchen again, but this time, it was entangled by the power of the water swamp. On the other side, a bleak voice came from where the God King Bonecrusher and the Ethereal King were. "Get back here." This voice seemed to have some kind of strange power that forcibly suppressed the Earth-type array flag spirit. Chapter 1000. When Longchen saw the Earth array flag being pulled back, he couldn't help but slow down. However, he immediately sped up. He was extremely fast, but strangely, he didn't activate any of the spirit-sealing water swamp's power. His eyes were fixed on the skeletal hand that came out from the depths of the spirit-sealing water swamp. When the Earth array flag's spirit landed on the skeletal hand, the dark fog that surrounded the area where the bone-killed God King and the Ethereal King were fused suddenly shook and disappeared. A terrifying corpse revealed its original appearance. This corpse was still made of white bones, but the green light in its eye sockets was no longer there. Instead, it was replaced by a pair of eyes that were condensed from soul power. This bone god had a total of 6 heads, 6 skeletal bodies, and 6 pairs of arms and legs. When the void soul was condensed, it didn't look like the bone-kill God King or the ethereal king. The centermost head stared at Longchen and said coldly, "Since the two of us have merged, we must kill you today." This voice didn't belong to the bone-kill God King or the ethereal king. The aura around it rose to the 6th level of the God King realm. Such a terrifying power had exceeded Longchen's imagination. This scene reminded Longchen of the reincarnation spring when the void soul had invaded the mountain. It was just as he had guessed. The ethereal king and the white bone God King came from the same origin. Now that the two of them had merged for a short period of time, their fighting strength was many times stronger. "Go to hell." The skeletal body moved and the array flag waved crazily. The array flag's spirit had a mournful expression. Close to 100 Earth array flags landed on Longchen. At the same time, the 6 heads on the skeletal body cried out in unison. 6 inherited soul skills whizzed out. Every inherited soul skill had the terrifying power of a middle-stage God King. The soul skills turned into 6 shooting stars that pierced through space and landed on Longchen. Divine light filled the sky and was filled with extreme destructive power. This state of fusion was a huge burden to the bone-killed God King and the ethereal king. The two of them attacked with killing power. Meanwhile, in Longchen's mind, the Sovereign Lord's remnant soul said solemnly, "Their origins have fused together. If you are hit by their attacks, you will definitely die. Move faster." Longchen felt his soul tremble when he saw 6 Dao's mid-stage Divine King Inheritance soul skill and the ultimate release of the Earth Array flag. An attack like this was probably enough to kill any mid-God King. "Suppress." Longchen did not reply to the Sovereign Lord's remnant soul. Instead, he flew faster and faster. With a roar, the Jiutsang halberd soared into the air and expanded to tens of thousands of feet in size. It blocked the endless attacks before him. Rumble. The black light on the 9 heaven suppression halberd was unleashed to the extreme, and cracks appeared on the halberd. 3 breaths. In just 3 breaths, the halberd broke. "Let's end this." Longchen stopped abruptly. Just as he finished speaking, the surrounding space suddenly stagnated. The 6 Dao's inheritance soul skill and the endless Earth Array Dao patterns stopped abruptly 10 meters in front of Longchen. Countless water luster Dao patterns began to appear like carps crossing the river and filled every corner of the area. At this moment, Longchen seemed to be unable to move at all. The fused bodies of God King Bone Kill and God King Bone Kill were the same. However, their eyes were filled with fear. She followed his gaze. The endless water luster Dao patterns in the entire space were redrawn. Every node was where Longchen was standing. CI. The 5 streams flowed back and forth again. The ice pool in the sky reappeared. Even the huge rock that was struck by the 9 heaven suppression halberd was formed again. Everything seemed to have returned to its original state. The only place that had changed was the place where Longchen and God King Bone Kill were standing. In the eyes of God King Bone Kill and God King Bone Kill, Longchen was standing in the center of the water luster Dao patterns. "Break!" Longchen pointed his right hand into the air, and 5 streams surged into the sky. They directly drowned the inherited soul skills that filled the sky. Following that, the Earth-type array flags released the power of nearly 100 killing arrays. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the sky was filled with multicolored lights that intersected, indescribably gorgeous. However, in the eyes of God King Bone Kill and God King Bone Kill, this scene sent chills down their spines. Even an idiot could tell that Longchen had become the master of this space that was suppressed by the water luster Dao. In the past few days of fighting, he used us to destroy the most powerful water luster killing array in many Dao patterns in order to find that key place. He reactivated the array and restored it to its original state. He stood on the main array and changed the structure of the array. God King Bone Kill's voice came from one of the white skulls. His voice was trembling. Although the ethereal king was silent, the Earth Array flag's spirit seemed to have seen something unprecedented. He said, "How is this possible? Do you have the bloodline of the Zhuge Forbidden God clan?" No, you're not from the Zhuge Forbidden Godluster Dao pattern. You'll incur the wrath of the patrolling formation God King in the Zhuge Forbidden Godluster Dao pattern. Longchen looked exhausted. He reached out his right hand and clenched it. He muttered, "It's time to take revenge for the Arch-Zhan Kuang." As he said that, he clenched his right hand tightly. The Ice Luster Dao pattern turned into 3 giant beasts again. Boundless Dao pattern offensive power swept out. At the same time, the killing arrays in all directions were activated. In the blink of an eye, God King Bone Kill and the Earth Array Flag's spirit were drowned. The Forbidden Godluster Dao pattern that had been reformed was destroyed again. The only thing that didn't change was that Longchen was still standing where he was. He held the broken 9 firmament-suppressing halberd in his hand and looked regretful. After a few breaths, the scene returned to its original calm. The place where God King Bone Kill and the Earth Array Flag were still empty. Only the Array Flag was inserted into the ground. Beside the Array Flag, there were 2 balls of light intertwined. One was black and the other was white. This is their origin energy. It won't be of much use to you. However, if the skeletal creature behind you swallows it, its combat power will increase rapidly. In comparison, the Earth Array Flag is not bad. If you can gather all 5 of them, it'll be very useful when you repair the 9 firmament-suppressing halberd. The Emperor Lord's remnant soul's voice reached Longchen's ears. Longchen reached out and put away the 3 items. His body also began to recover at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this moment, even he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Today's battle was really a close call. If it weren't for the Forbidden Godluster Dao pattern, he wouldn't have been able to resist the combined combat power of the 2. As soon as the battle flag was in his hand, Longchen's body suddenly stiffened. At the same time, the Emperor Lord's remnant soul's divine thought entered his body and said, "It's too late. With this person's speed, you won't be able to escape in the Forbidden Godluster." At the same time, Chapter 1001. Longchen could not help but smile bitterly. When he saw the 4 formation flags, he knew that it was the patrolling Divine King who was flying over. He had come too quickly. However, even if he had discovered him earlier, Longchen would not have been able to escape from the battle with the Bone-Killed Divine King. Longchen had no intention of escaping. He stood where he was and waited for the patrolling Divine King to arrive. However, he was thinking about how he could survive today. The patrolling Divine King had already used the battle prowess of a late-stage Divine King. His terror was not something that Longchen could contend against. The patrolling Divine King descended from the sky. The item in Longchen's hand that the 9 treasures Divine King had given him was already in his grasp. This was because at this very moment, the immeasurable monarch and 9 treasures Divine King were both being held in the hands of the patrolling Divine King. Their bodies had already been reduced to dust. Only their souls were left behind. The patrolling Divine King stared at Longchen, then glanced at the Earth formation flag in his hand. He raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "You actually killed the Ethereal King and the Bone-Killed Divine King." Unbelievable. Longchen glanced at the 2 souls in the patrolling Divine King's hands. He took a deep breath. His voice was already trembling from anger. He forced himself to calm down and said, "You can't kill me. You can't kill them either." Although he said that, he still did not loosen his grip on the item. However, he knew that even if the 9 treasures Divine King were to descend, Zhuzang Dizuan and the immeasurable Emperor would still be dead for sure. This was something that he did not wish to see no matter what. The patrolling Divine King snorted coldly. A sinister smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He looked around and said in a deep voice, "You probably don't know why I'm called the patrolling Divine King, right? The Forbidden God Watermarsh. My lineage has been guarding it for close to 10,000 years. How dare you? If I'm not wrong, you were the one who tampered with the formation runes today, right?" As he spoke, the pressure around him fluctuated. Longchen's body, which had not yet fully condensed, instantly shattered into a few more blood swords. The souls of the immeasurable emperor and Juzang Dizuan let out shrill cries. Longchen took a deep breath and shouted, "Don't you want to know why I was able to tamper with such a huge formation in the Forbidden God Water Marsh? I don't want to know, and there's no need for me to know. Anyone who dares to tamper with this array formation will be killed without mercy." When the patrolling Divine King finished speaking, the 4 array flags instantly turned into 4 screens of light that fell towards Longchen. Boundless suppressive power rose and fell, causing space to violently tremble. Even the surrounding power of the forbidden divine water swamp was affected. All of this is because of Zhuge Ziyun. He was the one who told me everything here and allowed me to pass through the Forbidden God Water Marsh to the Zhuge Forbidden God clan. I saved his life before. Longchen's eyes turned red when he saw this. The item in his hand had been activated to the extreme, but it would be crushed in an instant. By then, the 9 treasures Divine King would be able to descend. Longchen still had some chance of survival by relying on the Emperor Lord's remnant soul. However, the souls of the immeasurable Emperor and Juzang Dizuan would be destroyed. Buzz. The screens of light instantly stopped. The patrolling Divine King's eyes were like torches as he stared at Longchen. "Zhuge Ziyun? Do you think I can spare your lives just because of a name?" The patrolling Divine King said coldly. Although the patrolling Divine King's words were harsh, he did not attack. In fact, when Longchen said this, he already somewhat believed him. Back then, when Longchen controlled the patrolling divine statue where the Blood Moon Well was, he was shocked. Now, Longchen even used the Forbidden Divine Water Marsh's formation to kill Divine King Boneskill and the Ethereal King. All of this made Longchen's words more believable. He already had the intention of recruiting these 2 people, so he naturally knew how strong they were. Longchen possessed the Sovereign Lord's remnant consciousness, so his observation skills were extremely detailed. Just as the patrolling Divine King finished speaking, a slight smile appeared on his face. He continued, "Zhuge Ziyun was once chased into the North Foot territory by a powerful enemy, and his life was almost in danger. If it wasn't for the elder beside him asking me to save him, he would have already died. Everything I said is true. Otherwise, how could I, a person from the North Foot territory, tamper with the Forbidden Divine Water Marsh's formation?" Hearing this, the patrolling Divine King frowned. He stared at Longchen with a serious expression. Longchen's words were true. He was not unaware of this. "I swear on the undying Tao Law that Zhuge Ziyun in the North Foot territory was once about to die. I used a spell to break the Ghost Python technique in his body and saved his life." Seeing the patrolling Divine King wavering, Longchen did not hesitate and quickly struck while the iron was hot. As expected, the patrolling Divine King's hands that were holding the immeasurable Emperor and the Juzang Dizuan's divine souls loosened. The patrolling Divine King pondered for a moment and said to Longchen, "I'll believe you today, but you and these 2 pieces of trash must come with me to the Zhuge Forbidden Divine Tribe to meet Zhuge Ziyun." In fact, when Longchen said Zhuge Ziyun's name, the patrolling Divine King had already given up on killing Longchen. Zhuge Ziyun, the young master of the Zhuge Forbidden Divine Tribe, the current generation's destined person. With such a status, he was not someone the patrolling Divine King could provoke. Longchen's life was worthless in his eyes. If he got into trouble because of this, it would not be worth it. Longchen nodded and replied, "I was going to pass through the Forbidden God Yuzhe to the Zhuge Forbidden Divine Tribe. It's better to have seniors help now." The patrolling Divine King snorted and threw the immeasurable Emperor and Juzang Dizuan to Longchen, "Follow me, I'll lead the way. It'll take at most 10 days from here to the Zhuge Forbidden Divine Tribe. We'll know if you're telling the truth or not." The immeasurable Emperor's expression was calm, but Juzang Dizuan's soul did not hide his anger at all. Longchen waved his right hand and pulled the 2 behind him. Then, he said to the patrolling Divine King, "Senior is right, we have no enmity between us, so why would I lie to you?" The patrolling Divine King took a deep look at Longchen and said, "Guarding the Forbidden Divine Swamp is part of my duty. So what if I tell others?" The patrolling Divine King flew through the air. A powerful aura was locked onto Longchen the entire time. Long Chen and the other two followed closely behind. With the patrolling Divine King leading them, they moved very quickly as if they were walking on flat ground. During this time, the patrolling Divine King tried to remove his protection around Long Chen, but Long Chen was still able to avoid the countless killing formations in the forbidden Divine Swamp. This made him even more afraid to attack Long Chen. If Zhuge Ziyun really told him to go to the Zhuge Forbidden Divine Tribe from here, then I'll be in danger sooner or later if I kill him. The patrolling Divine King murmured as if he was extremely wary of Zhuge Ziyun. Chapter 1002. Long Chen and the other two were led straight through the Forbidden God Marsh under the guidance of the patrolling God King. During that time, Long Chen received a piece of news from the immeasurable emperor that made his killing intent boil. It was that Bai Tsun of the people of Bai Yishan was dead, and Bai Yexing's origin energy was taken away, turning him into a dying man. That day, the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzan Dizuan parted ways with Long Chen. When the two were walking on the edge of the Forbidden God Marsh, they encountered the people of Bai Yishan. The people of Bai Yishan completely covered up their auras. Otherwise, with God King Boneskill and Ethereal King's intentions, they would have noticed Long Chen's presence even though he had caused quite a commotion. After God King Boneskill and Ethereal King entered the Forbidden God Marsh, the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzan Dizuan were taken away by the people of Bai Yishan. The immeasurable emperor and Zhuzan Dizuan were very grateful for that. The Forbidden God Marsh was full of killing intent for the two of them. They never thought that they would encounter the patrolling God King after leaving the Forbidden God Marsh. When the patrolling God King heard that the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzan Dizuan were related to Long Chen, he immediately captured them. The people of Bai Yishan also suffered a devastating blow. Long Chen kept this matter in mind, but the patrolling God King did not care at all. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Everyone had left the Forbidden God Marsh. Outside the marsh, they were already inside the Zhuge Forbidden God clan. The palaces of the Zhuge Forbidden God clan were arranged according to the 5 elements, and they were intertwined. Although they were located on a mountain range, the area changed constantly. However, the Forbidden God Marsh was like a sharp sword that stabbed into the center of the place from the outside. Whoosh! Whoosh! The patrolling God King brought Long Chen to the Zhuge Forbidden God clan, and as soon as they walked out of the Forbidden God Marsh, their auras locked onto them. Each of these people had the strength of a late-stage God King, and their auras were extremely terrifying. Patrolling Divine King? Do you want to die? You actually dared to bring people through the Forbidden God Water Marsh. The leading old man shouted in a deep voice. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the patrolling Divine King and Long Chen both felt an incomparable pressure. The patrolling God King hurriedly said respectfully, "This person tampered with the God-forbidding water swamp's formation in a short period of time all by himself. Before that, he even controlled the patrolling statue. He once said that he had saved young Master Ziyun's life. It was young Master Ziyun who ordered him to come here." As soon as the Divine King patrolling finished speaking, everyone was shocked and their gazes turned to Long Chen in unison. They were all high-ranking members of the Zhuge Jinshan clan, so they naturally knew what happened to Zhuge Ziyun. The leader shouted to the people behind him, "Why hasn't our young master mentioned this before? Go find Elder Jin, he has been by young master's side all this time." Behind Long Chen, the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzan Dizuan's divine souls floated up and down. The immeasurable emperor directly transmitted his voice to Long Chen with the power of his divine soul, that Zhuge Ziyun has violated the agreement from that day. If he intends to use others to kill you and does not fulfill his promise, our lives will be in danger today. Long Chen did not reveal anything, but he naturally knew the depth of the situation. That day, Zhuge Ziyun swore with the inextinguishable Dao Law that he would promise Long Chen 3 things, and that he would never become Long Chen's enemy. After that, he verbally promised to do it for 3 months, but in the end, he went back on his word. Now that the inextinguishable Dao Law was getting weaker and weaker, Long Chen was not sure if Zhuge Ziyun would really use others to kill him. However, things had already come to this. They had already arrived at the Zhuge Jinshan clan, so Long Chen could only take one step at a time. If Zhuge Ziyun went back on his word, the 9 Treasury Divine King would be his final trump card. If the 9 Treasury Divine King really had the battle prowess of a great perfection Divine King like Zhuzan Dizun said, then even the Zhuge Jinshan clan would not be able to suppress him immediately. Once Long Chen saw Zhuge Ziyun with his own eyes, no matter how weak the inextinguishable Dao Law was, he would have to fulfill his promise. Then, everything would be solved. After a moment of silence, the person called Elder Jin had already flown over. The moment he saw Long Chen, his expression changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with shock. He clearly remembered that back in the North Foot territory, Long Chen was only an emperor. In just a few short years, he had already stepped into the Divine King realm. Such a speed of advancement was truly shocking. However, he immediately seemed to have thought of something, and nodded to the Divine Kings. What he said is true, he really did save young Master's life in the North Foot territory. As Elder Jin finished speaking, the Divine Kings nodded one after another, and their wariness towards Long Chen lessened a little, and they even showed some gratitude. The patrolling Divine King frowned slightly, but he could only nod in the end. Before anyone could speak, Elder Jin said to Long Chen, "My young master is not in the clan right now, why don't you come with me to the room for a chat?" Long Chen agreed, and then left with the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzan Dizun. Seeing Long Chen leave with Elder Jin, the patrolling Divine King pondered for a moment, then turned around and entered the Forbidden God Marsh again. Although he knew that Long Chen must have a lot of resentment towards him, he also knew that Zhuge Ziyun would not take his life because of this. The patrolling branch of the Zhuge Jinshan clan was an extremely special existence. They had been guarding the Forbidden God Marsh for generations. On the other side, Long Chen followed Elder Jin to a room in a wind-type palace. These palaces were outlined by countless formations, and not only were they magnificent on the outside, but there were also countless suppressive formations inside. If an outsider were to enter, it would not end well. Inside the room, Elder Jin glanced at the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzan Dizun behind Long Chen, and said with a bitter smile, "I can order my clansmen to reconstruct their bodies, but you better leave the Zhuge Jinshan clan as soon as possible." Leave as soon as possible? Elder Jin's words caused Long Chen to frown. His voice turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, "This means that Zhuge Ziyun has the heart to go against the inextinguishable law." Elder Jin glanced at the immeasurable emperor and Zhuzan Dizun, and signaled Long Chen to let the two of them leave. Long Chen waved his right hand, and directly trapped the two souls, isolating them outside. Seeing this, Elder Jin said, "It's not that my young master wants to go against the inextinguishable law, it's that woman who wants to kill you." That woman? That woman is the one who almost killed young Master Ziyun that day, and she is also the one who carries the destiny of the Ghost Python clan. She is also where the fate of the clan lies. Elder Jin's next words caused Long Chen to be stunned. He did not expect that the woman he mentioned was the one who almost killed Zhuge Ziyun that day. Why did this person want to kill him? Long Chen's heart was filled with questions. Elder Jin smiled bitterly, and said, "My young master fell in love with this woman, and he also told her that you saved him. If my young master did not do his best to stop her, I'm afraid that the person who wants to kill you would already be on the other side of the Forbidden God Marsh." Long Chen frowned, and felt that the situation was extremely complicated. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.